3 minutes after 10 is the time. Very good morning to you. We haven't taken calls on the BBC presenter story all week, and I thought that when he was identified, and obviously like everybody else in the media and most of the people in the country, I knew who it was from quite early on in the story. I thought when he was identified that we may, but I'm not going to. I don't have anything to add to the story, nor do you. And until we know the full details of what's happened, it seems to me that all you do is add to the turmoil of two families that are going through different forms of hell at the moment. And unless I had some new light to bring to bear on it, I'm not sure what purpose would be served by talking about it. I really don't. Please don't talk about it, James. It's really not an interesting story for those of us outside the media. I don't necessarily agree with that. And I think that the media is in and of itself interesting, but I don't, as I say, have any particular comment to make, except that Friday night thing. As I said, I think I mentioned this to you earlier. I certainly said it on Twitter. The bit I didn't get from the very start was the denial that came in from the young person at the centre of the story the night before the Sun went to print with the tale. I've told you a million times, I was the world's worst tabloid journalist, the world's worst tabloid showbiz journalist, but I'm pretty sure that I felt from the start that was remarkable. You've actually got a legal intervention. You've got the lawyers coming in and saying, this isn't true, this isn't what happened. And listen, there may be different reasons why the young person did that or said that. The family wanted to know how he managed to get a lawyer. But to not include it in the story, to go in on the Saturday morning, to ruin someone's life, after the person at the centre of the story had issued a denial, I don't know. I really don't. We may talk about it next week, may talk about it tomorrow. We may open up the phone lines later in the week. But right now, there's two families there in absolute turmoil. And I don't think either of us, you or me, have got anything interesting, helpful, or new to say. So that's on me, all right? And I can live with your disapproval, disagreement, or indeed the opposite. I get 20 texts a day already asking me why I'm not talking about X, Y, or Z, so I don't think this will be any different, but I thought it was different enough for me to explain to you at the top of the show why I am not currently minded. I tell you what, there'll be uproar if I change my mind later and drop Mystery Hour. I am not currently minded to wade back into a conversation to which neither of us, neither you nor me, have anything interesting to add. 6 minutes after 10 is the time, and there are other stories around today as well, not least the fact that junior doctors today go on a 5-day strike. Patients have been told to expect significant disruption as the doctors in England begin their longest walkout yet over pay. And there are a few things going on here, aren't there? There is the very strange environment in which this strike is taking place. Because I have been doing this job, I've been talking to you every morning for a very, very long time. And the reaction to strikes has never felt less familiar to me than it does today. You know, and I know, that rail strikes are supposed to bring out the chomping, salivating beasts of Fleet Street, and union bosses are supposed to be portrayed as dinosaurs and barons and hypocrites. And then along came Mick Lynch and turned that paradigm upside down simply by being rather good engaging with interviewers. And then the doctors, who have been on the receiving end of all sorts of abuse, all sorts of nastiness whenever they've taken industrial action in the past. In fact, probably second only to the firefighters. The firefighters were the first one for me. I've told you this a few times, and I'm telling you again. The firefighters' strike, I forget the exact year, but I was still quite wet behind the ears. Boris Johnson was mayor of London, and a ridiculous figure called Brian Coleman was chair of the London and Emergency Fire Authority, and I was so completely naive that I just thought that the idea of firefighters taking industrial action, I don't know why, I wasn't paying particular attention before. Yeah, I wasn't really that into politics between my sort of teenage years, early 20s and early 30s. It's quite weird that. I think it's because that period of Labour government, everything was relatively calm, until the financial crisis. Do you remember when John Major thought that a Cones hotline was a productive use of his time? Imagine that. Imagine if we could go back to that, where politics was so boring that the actual Prime Minister was sitting in a car looking at some roadworks, wondering why there weren't any actually workers doing any roadworks, and thought to himself, I know, I will set up a hotline for people to ring to report roadworks where no one's doing any work. And everyone went, what a great idea, John. That's the kind of politician. Imagine going back to everything being that boring. I think that might be why I wasn't that politicised. You had a relatively peaceful handover in 97 and then 11 years of relative peace and kind. I know there were wars and international issues and stuff like that, but we weren't staring at mortgages being tripled overnight or votes on whether we should become the first country in history to impose economic sanctions on ourselves, or seeing absolute nonsenses like Nadine Dorries promoted to cabinet level, or Jacob Rees-Mogg cosplaying as some sort of Victorian mill owner all the way up to the Secretary of State for Business. I would give anything to go back to the days when a Prime Minister's inbox was so empty that he thought a Cones hotline would be a good idea. So that might be why. That and the fact that, as I've just mentioned, I was one of the world's worst tabloid showbiz journalists in the sense of coming up with scoops and unleashing scandals. I never unleashed a single scandal in my life. Happily, the paper I worked for didn't particularly want scandals. They wanted interviews with pop stars and actors and stuff, so I was very lucky. I loved doing all that. And I used to say, people say, why are you interested in going into the political side of things? I said, why would you want to hang out with Norman Lamont when you could be hanging out with Norman Cook? I always thought that was quite a good little linguistic play. And I still stand by it. But then I'd got this job. I started doing this job. And I started paying attention. Two or three different things happened. Not only did I start paying a bit more attention to the politics, while as the politics got more interesting, but I also started listening to you. And I became increasingly fascinated by how we end up thinking and holding the opinions that we hold. And I had never in my life paid any attention to it before. And for the first few years I was in this job, I didn't even pay much attention to it then. I'd set up a subject, you'd ring in and agree, and then you'd ring in and disagree, and then someone would ring in and agree, and then someone would ring in and disagree, and I'd have a bit of a tizzy, and possibly we'd have a bit of a scrap, or we'd pat each other on the back, and then we'd move on to another time. And I never got into the why of it. It was always, what do you think? What do I think about this? What do you think about this? Never got into the why of it. And I remember the call. I remember the call that it happened on. The one that started making me think, it was a phone-in about immigration, would you believe? And someone came in with some fairly toxic views, and I just kept asking him where they came from. And kept asking him why. Trying to pin it down and pin it down and pin it down and focus in. John in Hounslow, it was. On why do you think that? Why do you say that? Why do you think that? Why do you say that? And everything changed that day. Everything became more interesting. And the biggest political moment, as opposed to personal, was the firefighters' strike. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. People that I knew, I know I've told you this before, but it merits repetition because we're about to see junior doctors who arguably would be people you'd expect to enjoy public sympathy on an even greater scale than firefighters. But people that I knew, people whose homes I had been to for dinner. So look, you catch me in my early 30s, right? I wanted a column, and I'd have taken a column anywhere. I'd have taken a column in the Sun, I'd have taken a column in the Mail. I wasn't really clear on what having a column like that would have involved, but I knew how to play the game. If I hadn't got this job, I'd have gone back onto those tracks. God knows where I would have ended up. Somewhere very different to where I am today, both professionally and personally, because I was good at provocative opinions. I could muster it up without really pausing to worry too much about whether I meant it or not. And I got this job. I got given this enormous freedom to work out stuff live on air. And the firefighters' strike was one of the maddest moments of my entire life. Because I was opening up newspapers and I was seeing people who I had been out with the previous weekend, or people that I would do newspaper reviews with on Sky News, and they were attacking firefighters. It was like a sort of road to Damascus moment for me. I'm thinking, how can What? Firefighters? Listen, for a start, I know that various brigades have had various problems particularly over recent years. And we know, of course, that the police service in particular is riddled with all sorts of horrible behaviours. But the simple professional requirement of running into a burning building while the rest of us run out of it always struck me as a bit of a no-brainer, a bit of a deal breaker. Yeah, all right. You might be asking for a pay rise. On the other hand, you're the ones that will rescue my children from burning buildings in the event of our house catching fire. And then I saw what happens when the mangle of right-wing media starts turning, and even firefighters will be crushed beneath its wheels. And that, for years, has been how strikes have been reported and received in this country. For years. And now it's not. Because today, junior doctors, who I stress are very much a category of fellow citizen that we would all expect to receive public sympathy in spades, junior doctors are going on a 5-day strike, and it's not even front page news. Even without the Hugh Edwards story, it wouldn't be front page news. You've got Sunak weighing up 6% public sector pay rises. That makes the front page of the Telegraph. That's, again, a remarkable evolution on what has happened, because not that long ago, the government was saying they couldn't give the pay rises that the unions were asking for because they were bigger than the recommendations coming in from the independent pay review bodies. And now Sunak is close to saying, well, we can't give you what the independent pay review bodies are suggesting because it will have too negative an impact on inflation. But the absence of outrage at the junior doctors' strike is one of those things that you don't really notice unless you stop and have a proper look at it. It makes the front of The Guardian, but obviously The Guardian aren't going to be attacking public sector workers in the sort of lazy right-wing way that we have become used to seeing over the years. The warning is, of course, that there's no way he's going to be able to cut waiting times if strikes are still disrupting care beyond the summer. So there's political and economic pressure being piled upon the Prime Minister from all sides. And yet, it's not there. And I thought we'd start today by asking why. Not what you think about the junior doctors' strike, although we will get on to that. I'd love to hear from striking doctors, just your thoughts as someone who, by dint of listening to this programme, you pay a little bit more attention to the news than perhaps the average Joe or Joanna, and you're looking at this today and you're listening to me and you're thinking, God, he's right, isn't he? Normally they'd be absolutely attacking the doctors. They sharpen their blades. We spoke to that trainee doctor, didn't we? The medical student who bizarrely had her sort of bikini Instagram photos plastered all over the Daily Mail because she had been posting support for strikes she couldn't even go on by dint of still being a medical student. That was a bizarre story, but that was normal. Not long ago, that was much more normal than what we're seeing now. So I live in a country where striking public sector workers normally get crucified by the right-wing media. Okay? Why is it not happening? As junior doctors prepare to undertake the longest walkout in the history of the National Health Service, a 5-day walkout over pay, it started, it's up and running. Why is the response so muted? Why is it not getting more attention? Not just from right-wing newspapers who would traditionally be crucifying these characters, these doctors, but also from you. That's the question. I'm not asking you to do my homework because I'm giving it lots of attention. So you can't say, well, why aren't you talking about it then? Because I am. But I just want to know why this is not the bonfire that at every other point in my career as a broadcaster, industrial action taken by public sector workers in particular, and then railway workers on the private side of things, but junior doctors especially. Last time they were on strike, we had to invite 3 into the studio to try and push back against all the vitriol and hatred that was being punted everywhere else. 3 lovely people. It was a brilliant phoning because you got to ask them proper questions about what was happening rather than relying on the distortions of the right-wing media. But now, I mean, it's barely reported at all. A 5-day strike by junior doctors, it's going to disrupt healthcare for thousands of people. It's probably going to scupper Rishi Sunak's hopes of bringing waiting lists down, one of his 5 plastic pledges. And yet, we're hardly talking about it, and it's hardly being reported. And the people who would normally be sharpening their cudgels to attack the doctors are close to silent on the subject. And I don't know why, but I would like to. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Why do you think the junior doctors' strike is close to going under the radar, despite being the biggest and the longest and the most impactful in the entire history of the NHS? Because hand on heart, I don't get it. 21 minutes after 10, strikes are still, plaguing the country, riddling the country, call them what you will. But the fact that junior doctors today have gone on strike for the longest period of time in their history, in the NHS's history. It will run until 7 o'clock on Tuesday morning. Thousands of planned appointments will be postponed. More senior doctors will fill in to provide emergency care, but wait for it, they go on strike themselves next week on Thursday and Friday. 999 still there for life-threatening emergencies, but I think you'd have to be absolutely crackers not to think that this is going to have an enormous impact upon the population. And yet, today, the Hugh Edwards story notwithstanding, it is barely reported at all, or it is not. So, page 2 of The Sun, you've got Ben Wallace. Page 3, you've got Barbie World. Then you've got more Hugh Edwards. And then you've got page 6, bottom of page 6, 6 paragraphs, 5-day doc strike after Tory apathy. They're not even attacking the doctors. They're making it 50-50, as much about the Tory government as it is about the striking doctors. The longest period of industrial unrest in NHS history, and it's getting a fraction of the attention that the average strike historically from railway station cleaners would get. And I just want to know, because we talk about this kind of thing quite a lot on the programme, what you think is going on. John's in Croydon. John, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I believe that with the absence of a left-wing media that is vocal, other than yourself, then what you see...
Who are you calling left-wing? Go on.
Well, I do listen to you, James. Basically, with the absence of that, the right-wing media are sort of looking at that and thinking, well, hang on, there's nobody here to sharpen the tools on and go in on the doctors because nobody's making any noise. So if we make the noise and go down that line, we might be drawing attention to it. It's just best to stay silent, lads. And then if they chirp up...
But historically, I like that. But historically, I think you're younger than me, so you're going to have to trust me on this. The voices you describe have always been in a tiny minority, and it's never stopped the right-wing newspapers and right-wing broadcasters from going for the throat of striking doctors. In fact, what I'll do, I will dig out during the half-past news, I'll dig out some of the headlines from the last time they were on strike, and then your theory struggles a bit. Why on earth are junior doctors
because they
not...
have other mechanisms now, with what they see in the culture wars and stuff like that, that might be the battlefield they're trying to play on. So that isn't like where they have different
mechanisms
to pull on strings. It does, but I just think that, like you said, it's on a fine line for Rishi. He's called a way on this is going to go. He's called a margin in his world, and so therefore he has skin in the game. If it doesn't go correctly for him, then like you say, that doesn't go right. There will always be these things, but I think that's why it's toned back a bit. Like you say, you have more experience than me.
Listen, you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it. That's why I come to work every day. So that we can all think about stuff. But I don't think... two things. Number one, they don't jump, as much as it sometimes seems that way. They don't always jump to the government's tune. Right-wing newspaper owners like to attack trade unions because they hate trade unions. But on this occasion, they clearly don't think that the attacks are... Well, I don't know. I can't put words into the mouth of the media owners. But they're thinking, I don't think this will work. That would be a better theory, John. They genuinely looking at the battlefield and thinking, I don't think we can win this one, lads. The public aren't going to turn on the junior doctors in the way that they have done in the past. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Julie picks up on that point. More of the public are supportive this time because they're experiencing cost of living struggles too. It doesn't take long, though. You can get turned against train drivers in the blink of an eye. They earn so much. And then you can be encouraged to forget the fact that most people who work on the railways don't earn anything like what railway drivers earn. And in my opinion, they're good for their salaries anyway. But the divide and rule tactic has never failed in the past. Why are they not even trying it today? Ivor's in Tamworth. Ivor, what would you like to say?
Morning.
Hello.
Well, the trouble is the country at the moment looks as though it's in chaos with all the different strikes going on. Over the past few days, over 1,700 migrants have arrived on small boats, and we're ignoring all of that because the government needs to be seen to be in control of everything. So it's not reported. We keep on going like this, so people don't think, we need a change of government because all this is going wrong. Nothing's going wrong if it's not being reported, is it?
So
Nobody's making a shout about it.
So the newspapers that would, even now, still prefer a Conservative government moving forward.
Oh, definitely.
That just doesn't hold, does it, Ivor?
Honestly, James,
I haven't got an answer to the question, so you need to tell me if I'm being unduly aggressive in my pushback against you, all right? Because I don't have an answer myself.
You get aggressive, I don't mind. You used to shout you that.
Go on.
But no, if you look at 1,700 migrants, last week, a month ago, that would have been a massive story, wouldn't it? In 5 days.
Yes. Yeah, it just would, actually. I think you're right. Yesterday,
the NSUWT voted for strikes in September.
They did.
Onwards, and joining up with all the other teaching unions to create strikes. We're not telling people about it. Next week, a week after, the radiographers are on 2-day strikes, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
We've got all of this going on. We've got the cost of living crisis, but we're not hearing much about inflation anymore, are we? There's no graphs on the fronts of the pages.
Right. Is this a conspiracy theory?
Yes, they're coming around. They have to be showing the government as a what's Rishi want to be? He's one of these
competent,
that's
stable.
The word I was thinking about. Yes, competent, stable. He's a manager.
All right. So why in 2016 we had a Tory government, and the right-wing news. 2015, sorry, we had a Tory government, and the right-wing newspapers absolutely crucified junior doctors.
Yeah. Well, times have changed. They see at the moment that
2016.
Yeah, they see this at the moment that the Labour Party could get in.
So okay, no, that's an answer. It's better than anything I've got.
Might be boring, but he's another person who could manage the situation, just like Rishi.
So all right, like John, I can't be too critical of people who've at least managed to insert something into the available space because I've got nothing myself. 2015 and 2016, so crucial moment. Junior doctors' strike. The firefighters' strike was long before that. That was my pendulum swinging moment where I began to look at the world differently, began to look at strikes differently, began to look at public sector and began to look at my own profession very differently. But he's right, isn't he? You know, the pledges, you'd have thought, would be garnering rather more attention. It looks like he's failed on the small boats. He's failed on inflation. He's failed on waiting lists if this carries on. But I'm not quite ready to believe that the right-wing newspapers aren't drawing attention to something they would historically have drawn lots and lots of attention to because it would be bad for a Tory Prime Minister. I mean, not least because the Mail is still fully signed up to the Boris Johnson fan club, and that fan club loves seeing Rishi Sunak struggling. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Superb programme yesterday, James. You give us hope. That's from Anne Tarrant. Thank you, Anne. What a lovely thing to say. But obviously, you know, that's fish and chip paper now. I'm pushing today's programme to the parts that no other radio programme can reach. And the question that I'm asking is, I think, quite an important one. In fact, it just got a bit bigger, didn't it? You've got big teachers' strike coming up. You've got radiographers going out. You've got senior doctors or consultants going on strike next week. You've got an almost... it's an almost standstill across huge swathes of the public sector. So why are the 80% of the UK media that would normally be telling you to hate the people on strike, why aren't they? That's all. Why are they not telling you how awful junior doctors are, how greedy teachers are? Oh, they get the summer holidays off. Why? I just want you to tell me why you think the usual voices that would be encouraging you to hate the strikers, and I use the word hate advisedly, are almost silent. Because I haven't got a Scooby-Doo. 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. That's such an ungrateful so-and-so. Look, I'm getting loads of messages now telling me how good yesterday's show was. You can always listen to shows on catch-up at Global Play. You can rewind live radio, apparently. And Carol Vorderman being a particularly fine contributor to the show yesterday. It was a very good show yesterday, but I'm now doing today's show. So even as you are being kind and complimentary, there's a little bit of me that's thinking, what have the last 33 minutes been then? Chopped liver? Honestly. What are we talking about today? A fairly straightforward question. I would, if you had ever said to me, any point in the last 20 years, and I've been doing this job, if you'd said, there's a strike next Thursday, what will the right-wing newspapers do? I'll say they will go absolutely tonto. They will go, first I say, who's on strike? And if you said firefighters, I go, oh dear, they're going to be absolutely crucified. Well, no, actually, James, it's the doctors. Yep, they're going to be crucified. There's a strike next Thursday. Who is it? Doctors, crucifixion. So there's a strike today, 5 days, longest ever, nothing. Next to tumbleweed. Even the Sun is talking about government apathy as opposed to strikers' greed or whatever. So why? What's changed? What's different today from every other strike we have ever talked about together on the radio? Tracy's in Trafalgar Square. Tracy, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Tracy.
I think they're not reporting it in the right-wing media because they're on a loser. I kind of like to say the vast majority of the public are with the doctors, with the nurses. Even if you're not with them in kind of stringent terms, I think nobody is against them.
Yeah.
If you start publishing all that stuff, you haven't got the support, and all they're trying to do is not put it on the front page because they're not going to win, and also because they don't want us talking about. We shouldn't be talking about why our muppets of a government are not sitting over a table and trying to protect us, the public, the patients, the NHS, and recognise the likes of the doctors and the nurses, and so many people who did so well in COVID, who we all applauded, all those people. And they don't want to talk to them. They don't want to find a compromise.
Yeah, right, listen, hands on table, cards on table. Mm-hmm. I am in that mood now where I think because I'm embarrassed that I haven't been able to come up with a good answer to this question myself, I have, with the previous two callers and now with you, I'm going to start picking holes in your analysis. Is that all right?
Yeah, go
because in 2015, 95% of people who took part in a Healthcare Professionals Network poll answered yes to the question, should junior doctors strike over the government's proposed contract? So in 2015, they had 95% public support, according to the polling, but it didn't stop the newspapers treating them like scum. So what's different this year?
What's different this year is this government, for so long, in power, incompetent, and they, like I say, they just don't want to discuss it.
Yeah, but we don't know what's different, do we? We can't quite work it out. Because 2015, coalition government, Cameron, bit of a mess, tuition fees not quite going. I mean, and the right-wing media likes conservative governments. Why are they not attacking junior doctors this year? Answer, because the public supported them. Well, they supported them last time. Answer,
because of COVID. Because of COVID.
Oh, wow, yeah. All right, I'll put that on the list.
Because of COVID.
Our warmth towards healthcare professionals is as high as it will ever be, and therefore the invitation to hate them is simply not going to land.
Yeah, I think we all recognise, however supportive of money and pay rises,
that's a great point.
We all recognise what they did. And we should recognise that. We should recognise that in more than just, banging
I think you're right. I think you could be onto something there. In fact, I would love to know whether doctors and indeed nurses, who also, of course, are still engaged in potential industrial action, agree with that. Is there a sense that even these newspapers, these vampiric, vile organs, would balk at the idea of trying to turn us against the people that we were clapping every Thursday night throughout lockdown? Cameron's in Islington. Cameron, what do you think?
Oh, nice to speak to you, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I've spoken before, and it was funny enough talking about how I was a doctor who wouldn't be able to afford a house.
Yes.
And you did a phone about young people not being able to afford homes. I think your question is really important because it highlights what's possibly changed within sort of the medical profession and within the BMA and strike action in general from doctors. The last time there was strikes in the sort of 2015-16 period, it was about the new contract that was imposed by Jeremy Hunt.
Yes.
The message from that at the time was about it being not safe, not fair, but there was a lot of disjointed messaging that was coming out. And so the press was picking up people from all over the place who were getting sort of dragged in, as they did with, the example you gave from the Daily Mail, with the young girl who was a medical student who got pulled in.
That was incredible.
It was horrendous. But they tried the same thing this time round, and it hasn't worked.
No, that was this time round.
No, they tried it this time round with.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
As
Sorry.
an example,
Yes.
but it hasn't worked in the same way. And I think a big part of that is because the BMA has fundamentally changed from how it was in 2016, and the movement has fundamentally changed. Because previously with strikes, and with the 2015-16 strikes, we had people calling in all over the place to give messages about why the strikes were important, what was wrong with the system. Yes. And this time around, we just have a single unified body, which is, Rob Lawrence and Vivek Trivedi.
Oh, you just think they've done a better job? Are you a union rep, Cameron? I should ask.
I'm not. No.
Okay, bigging them up just from the point of view of membership, then.
Yeah, they've done a better job of messaging, and actually, from a news point of view, and I think you'll appreciate this. You can't sell the same story every single time. Let me get there. So when you bring on people like Rob and Vivek, and they say to them, "Do you not care about patients?" Every single time they go, "Yes, we do care about patients," and that's true of all the doctors. We do care. When they say, "What? Do you not think you're being unreasonable?" The same message is always given out. We are being reasonable. We're asking for what we were paid in 2008. That message is consistent, and it's always, we're asking for the government to come and speak to our BMA reps and BMA team, and they're not doing it. And so if the government aren't going to say anything, and the only people that are willing to come forward are the junior doctors who then say, well, the government won't speak to us. Steve Barclay isn't present. Rishi Sunak won't engage. Jeremy Hunt isn't talking. Then the press has nowhere to run, because either they, as a right-wing media organisation, throw their own government under the bus, or they bring out a group of people who are fairly unified, aren't being picked apart because there's not lots of different messages coming out at the same time. And so they can't run the story they want to sell, which is, junior doctors are awful, they're greedy. Because
that's just not going to land at the moment, especially perhaps with a Prime Minister worth hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. The idea of portraying the people on the other side as the greedy ones may not work.
Yeah.
I think that's a really strong analysis. The only fly in the ointment of it, for me, because it's more my world than yours, the media, and medicine is more your world than mine, is that you're being logical. And historically, the vicious attacks upon you and your colleagues, or upon firefighters, or upon teachers, or upon everybody really in the public sector and beyond, have never really been logical. They've always been emotional. So I think perhaps the only bit missing is the why the emotional appeals wouldn't work at the moment. The emotional appeals to the public.
Is it because the way that they win in portraying their message of us, or junior doctors being greedy or being malicious or not caring, is by trying to get that sort of response out of the people they're interviewing, and they're not getting that. Yeah. And so they can't sell that message, because it's quite hard to sell something without a bit of evidence, or a little bit of pseudo evidence to just push out there to say, look, this one person said it, so they represent everyone. That message isn't there.
Yeah, you could be right. I made one mistake. Well, I've made millions, obviously, but I made one this morning. I think I was leafing through the Mirror, thinking that I was leafing through the Sun. So that's why you've got the 5 days dock strike after Tory apathy. That's why you've got the government being put in the frame. The Sun have it further back in the paper, still at the bottom of a page, just 5 or 6 paragraphs on page 11. Striking junior doctors have been told to enjoy their downtime and swap the picket line for a picnic. That's the closest they can come to trying to turn you against doctors, is the BMA we're encouraging you to spend time with your colleagues. You're welcome to picket, but downtime is important too. So I think that adds to Callum's analysis, doesn't it? They're being sensible and on message and clear. But why do you think that they're not telling you to hate the doctors? This is good. When you are winning, you go on the offensive. When you are losing, you go on the defensive. A lot of people pointing out that the doctors aren't on strike in Scotland. I did mention that at the top of the hour, but they are on strike in England. So that's why we're talking about it, a 5-day strike. What Scotland is doing better is something you are more than welcome to contribute to the programme. Wayne's in Gloucester, which is not in Scotland. Wayne, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I agree with the lady before. I think the difference between 2016 and now, with the doctors particularly, is the fact of COVID. That so many of us were touched by it in unusual than any time before with the NHS, and what we needed, and how many people died, and how many people knew someone, even if it wasn't their direct relative. I don't think the appetite is out there. But secondly, and I think this feeds into that, is the right-wing press can't be right-wing enough. So I think the likes of these new conservative groups that came out, early this week, late last week.
Yeah.
I think the papers want to write like that at the moment. The Mail. I think they want to be harder than that, but there just isn't the appetite, and they're a business ultimately, and they need to sell papers.
So it just wouldn't land. It wouldn't land.
I think at the moment it would turn even some of the Mail readers off. So they're talking about apathy.
I think there's something.
They're talking about a Conservative government that are obviously struggling more than but I can't believe I'm saying this, even more than when Boris was in power.
Well, different struggles.
Yeah, but what they're not doing is appealing to that core right vote. So therefore, the paper have nothing to write about.
So which is why they're both writing about picnics, actually. The Mail have got it on page 2, which is, I mean, it sounds prominent, but it's not. You don't put your big stories on page 2, but what they are doing is following the Sun and going on the picnic line. So they're just sowing the seed that striking doctors are taking the mickey because they're all going to be going on a picnic. But of course, they'd be even crosser. They'd be even crosser if they were all on a picket line. So they don't really know what to do if it's not binary.
It's unknown. This is really, it's a year to the election, potentially.
Well, we've got by-elections on the horizon as well, of course. Yeah. But then historically, attacking strikers when there's a Conservative government is good for Conservative governments, historically, but not probably now, because as you say.
I also think the by-elections, I think people are waiting to see how bad it is. Obviously there's the polling that says even the likes of Selby, which is got a huge...
Careful, I don't know whether we're in Purdah or not at the moment, so don't go any further until I'm clear on that. He said absolutely nothing wrong, but the only Ofcom complaint I've ever had upheld, Wayne, was due to me discussing a by-election live on the radio, and I'm keen not to repeat that particular moment of career magic. I will, however, thank you, mate. I think we're getting there. Actually, I wasn't sure we were going to today. Some of it I should have seen on the horizon, but like everybody else, I've been a little bit distracted by other events and stories. One thing I would do is just put Ailid Garrett's name back in the mix. Ailid is the medical student who was inexplicably attacked by the Daily Mail for going on holiday or rather going abroad and having a medical procedure while junior doctors were taking industrial action. As a medical student, she is, of course, incapable of taking industrial action, but the Mail went for her in April of this year for the apparent offence of being a big cheerleader of junior doctors on social media, but being abroad having a liposuction. She told us, she rang in to tell us about it, at the time of the last industrial action, or one of the more recent industrial actions. So that's a really good example of what you would expect them to be doing. It's desperate and pretty grim behaviour, and she's not even a junior doctor, she's a medical student, but that gives you a flavour of what these outlets and outfits would be doing in normal circumstances and what is abnormal about these circumstances. Wayne's pinned it down. Even your Uncle Keith, even your Auntie Doris, with her Daily Mail being drip-fed into her by an IV unit every day, even they, right now, can't be turned against junior doctors. Although then I remember my friend who went into hospital. Her mum went into hospital with her back catalogue of Daily Mails, and you go in to visit your mum in hospital, and she's telling you how wonderful the care has been, but also how greedy they are for going on strike. Maybe that was a one-off. Hope so. 10:47. It's 10 minutes to 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's an enjoyable conversation, and I guess it works. We'll have to wait and see. Well, it definitely works. I thought it was a bit silly of me to miss it. Why aren't junior doctors getting a kicking as they embark upon a 5-day strike? Because of COVID, because of the way we were looked after during COVID. But I'm afraid the teachers are not receiving anything like the vitriol that they would ordinarily expect either. And I don't think that the railway workers did. I mean, the levels of public support for the rail strike were pretty immovable. So I think the COVID factor, can we call it that? The COVID factor is definitely playing a part in the softening of the usual resolves, but it can't be all of it. Is it because everyone's feeling a bit skint? Everyone's feeling a bit skint, therefore people asking for a pay rise. But that doesn't usually work either, because you call them greedy. You see, so it'd be great. I often think this. I said to you yesterday, sometimes I envy the furiously hard of thinking right-wing commentators. It just must be great. What are you going to talk about today? I'm going to slag off Meghan Markle. What are you going to talk about tomorrow? I'm going to slag off Sadiq Khan. What are you going to do the next day? I'm going to slag off Diane Abbott and environmental protests. There's so much to get your teeth into. It's a little bit harder to find fertile territory for discussion if you are more interested in facts and feelings, and you want to speak truth to power rather than tickle power's tummy. But the strike stuff, really easy normally. What are you getting by on at the moment? Oh, tuppence halfpenny change. Well, look at these greedy doctors, eh? Who do they think they are? And those teachers, do you know how much time they get off in the summer? It's so easy to do it. But it is a decision has either been made that it's not worth trying or that it's not working, and I wonder which it is. Alex is in Southend. Alex, what do you reckon?
Oh, hi, James. Nice to speak to you.
Likewise.
I think your last caller was right that it is to do with COVID, but I think COVID's such a big thing, or was such a big thing. It's kind of like World War One. It's kind of like a change to the kind of societal contract that we have. And I
do you think so?
Seeing that. I think it's massive. And I think people are seeing kind of how important the NHS was, how important teachers are, whether you've got children or whether your colleagues have got children. And I think people are starting to think about other people, whether it's NHS or doctors or people. And then that's making them question what they're being fed, say, with firefighters or trains. And I think the reason that the right-wing press aren't going after it is that the press are quite sensitive to the society's kind of feelings, and they realise that people are going to question their stories rather than just...
Yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, I'm probably a bit more cynical than you about the way they operate, because I've seen them ride roughshod over decency and reality for my entire life, and I'm a tiny bit closer to the action by dint of being in the same business. There's a tension, isn't there? You're never quite sure whether they are manipulating public opinion, i.e. creating it, or whether they do that thing, it's beautifully described, Boris Johnson's whole career, of waiting to find out which way the crowd is running and then going to the front of it and pretending that you're leading. I think they do both. And on this occasion, you're saying they're reading the room and deciding not to set off a stink bomb.
I think they've confused themselves with kind of social media and what they're pumping out, and they can't kind of read it as much as they can. But with shows like yours and kind of looking at Twitter, I think there's far more people out there that are seeing the world how maybe you see it and how I see it.
Push a little further back on the idea that you're just not going to take this anymore. You don't be ridiculous. You're not going to turn me against a doctor or a teacher. I can see what they're going through every day, and COVID, for doctors in particular, brought everything into very sharp relief. And I mean, you're kind about this show, but it's a minnow, mate, in the great scheme of things. Twitter is different. And, of course, that threat to Twitter posed by Elon Musk's appalling management is tinfoil hat territory, because I said to you about a year ago, not just Alex, I said to you as well, about a year ago, I said they're not going to let this continue because Twitter is becoming a real force. They are getting really, really worried by the fact that somebody who is not sponsored by, a Murdoch or a Viscount Rothermere, someone who is not sponsored by these people can get 1 million followers on Twitter, or even 250,000, twice as much, way more than newspapers are read. You can have a Twitter following, and they can't let that happen, because that way madness lies. You cannot control public discourse if the public are actually allowed to join in whenever and however they like. You can only control public discourse if you hold the reins of power, which is, of course, why the 2 new television stations sprang up in the aftermath of Twitter. But, of course, now that Elon Musk has bought it, the threat is diminishing daily. I had to double-check, actually, because I thought I must be imagining it. But the Daily Mail ran, well, they certainly did it online. I don't know whether it made the paper or not. When it was announced that Musk was thinking of taking over Twitter, the Mail ran a piece, like a big piece with pictures and everything, of how all the lefties were losing followers and all the kind of fellow travellers on the right were gaining followers. And I thought, I must have imagined that. They can't really have thought it was national news that I'd lost 241 followers on Twitter in a week. So I Googled it the other day and it was still there. That's how scared they were of the fact that you could, on this platform, almost defy the media ownership model. So I think you might be onto something there, but let's just hope that Threads gets its act together double quick on that front, because Twitter is in mortal peril at the moment. Thank you, Alex. Mark's in Somerset. Mark, what would you like to say?
My wife is a consultant in the NHS. She has been for about 20 years and qualified in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I had to collect her from work 4 hours after her shift finished,
Gosh.
which she will not get back.
No.
And the trust that she works for, there should be 4 consultants, and she is the only one for the entire trust.
Good Lord.
Working last night, dealing with emergency patients. The reason I phoned in is because I used to be a teacher myself, and sort of seen it from two different strands, the same fight. She'll be going on strike after the junior doctors finish. And I thought it was interesting you were saying...
Can we just try and sort the phone? I don't know whether I don't put on a balaclava helmet or something like that, but the phone...
it is grotty. Yeah.
Huh?
Is that any better? Sorry, I am static.
No, it's not really, but I want to hear what you've got to say, so we'll endure. Carry on.
Okay, so basically she's given hours and hours and hours, days of work for free NHS, and it's grinding her down. I can see it.
Right.
She's totally committed to the NHS and its principles, and I was to public service teaching, to working in state schools,
Yes.
and it's been ground out of us.
I can hear it.
And that's partly why we're striking, because I am so fed up of having to buy pencils, buy things for my classroom, because as Hunt said, that money's going to have to come out of our budgets. That there's no money.
I saw that
to
as
come
well.
out of
We'll
the
probably
budgets.
talk about that tomorrow, possibly. I hear you. The phone line is awful, so we'll talk again, I'm sure. The question of why the right-wing media aren't coming after you now, you've sort of answered it obliquely. It would simply be because there's no target on our back, really. Not when you're buying stationery for kids or bringing them breakfast. Not when you're the only consultant on duty when there should be 4. Not when the NHS has got 110,000 vacancies in it and the so-called new Conservatives are queuing up to talk about why we shouldn't fill them until somehow we've persuaded Dirty Gertie from number 30 to retrain as a nurse or a doctor, because God forbid we should bring anyone in from elsewhere. It's all linked, isn't it? It's all... almost inextricably linked. Thank you for that. A few calls waiting, actually, to contribute, but I think we'll return to it tomorrow. I'll tell you what I'm going to do next. Do you want to know what I'm going to do next? Shall I tell you what we're going to do next? It opened the show yesterday. I always get nervous when I do this, wondering why there wasn't more coverage of Boris Johnson's failure to hand over the phone upon which the WhatsApp messages he sent and received before May 2021 to the COVID inquiry. He actually breached a deadline, 4 o'clock on Monday. That was the point at which the government had to hand it over, but Boris Johnson hasn't given it to them. What do you think they're scared of? Genuine question. Hello, it's 3 minutes after 11. It's Thursday, isn't it? All day. That's what my dad used to say. It's all day, son. Thursday, which means it's mystery hour at 12 o'clock, unless something cataclysmic occurs. So that's something to look forward to. What was the other story yesterday morning when we were saying that the BBC had become a seagull rather than a trawler? It was sort of following stories rather than breaking them, because it didn't actually report on Johnson's failure or the failure of the government to hand over Boris Johnson's phone with the WhatsApp exchanges on it until yesterday afternoon, when the deadline was Monday at 4 o'clock. So that is from 4 o'clock Monday to about 4 o'clock Monday afternoon to about 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. That's 2 whole days, that is. Seriously, that's not an opinion, that's counting. And I'm pretty sure that's true. I apologise if I've got it wrong, but it absolutely categorically was not getting the attention that we felt yesterday it should deserve, that it clearly deserved. It's a huge story. It's an inquiry. It's a potential contempt. The idea that the High Court had ruled that the messages should be shared with the inquiry, and they haven't been. Boris Johnson claims that somehow the security services have ordered him not to do it because it's not safe, which just sounds like nonsense. The BBC reported yesterday that government officials have attempted to help Mr. Johnson access the data on the phone while in the company of his representatives, but it's never been in the sole possession of the government as it belongs to Mr. Johnson. Inevitably, he said that he would have full cooperation and happy to disclose any material. But I think we might be coming close to the point. Don't Don't shoot me down if I get this one wrong, all right? You know what my predictions are like. Pretty close to perfect lately. Well, since 2016, really. But how surprised would you be if the next chapter of this story involves nobody being able to remember the passcode? I don't know enough about phones. When my father passed away and I wanted to get into his BlackBerry, I couldn't. And I thought, I'll take it to one of those shops, you know. I'll take it to one of those market stores that says, we unlock phones and things like that. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't unlock phones. So I actually don't know what the technology is these days. But with that as a caveat, with my absolute admission of ignorance on the technological possibilities and otherwise, how stunned would you be if it emerged that Boris Johnson just couldn't remember the code to get his phone open anymore, or he'd lost his thumb? You could just about imagine him claiming that. Well, I was very keen to cooperate fully with the inquiry, but it is my phone is activated by my thumbprint, and unfortunately, through no fault of my own, I have lost my thumb. I have misplaced my thumb. Thummus Maximus has gone absentia. So I cannot open said phone with said thumb because said thumb has gone AWOL. Could you imagine Boris Johnson? I mean, not quite, but you wouldn't be too stunned, would you? So you've got a big problem here, I think, because that period up until May 2021 is crucial. It involves the period where he skipped 5 Cobra meetings. It involves the period when he was reportedly at death's door himself, doesn't it? And you need to remember as well that the government didn't want it to be handed over. So this is a right old palaver. Because he keeps saying he's happy to do it. He's happy for them to see everything while not actually managing to provide the stuff he says that they're happy to see. Downing Street are saying that he hasn't really lost his thumb. Stop texting me. Downing Street are saying that they don't want this to be handed over for reasons of sensitivity, working on the principle that you cannot trust a single syllable that comes out of Boris Johnson's mouth ever. He probably doesn't want it to come out either. He's just saying that he does because A, it gives him the best result in the short term, and B, it embarrasses Downing Street. But why wouldn't they want it to come out? All of the other messages have been handed over. All of the other, it's just this one phone, this one collection of WhatsApp messages that has not been complied with. So you've got exchanges with Rishi Sunak, Simon Case, Matt Hancock, remember him, all sorts of people, but they're held on a mobile phone which has been turned off and securely locked away since May 2021. Yeah, right. And that inevitably leads to the question of what could be on it. And I think, given that their failure to hand it over to the inquiry is pretty grim conduct, they lost a legal challenge, don't forget. The Cabinet Office lost a legal challenge to keep this from the inquiry, not necessarily going into the public eye. There's no guarantee that we'll ever see any of it, only if the inquiry thinks it is relevant to their to the parameters of their inquiry. So I think, and I was conscious yesterday, I told you, of wanting this story to be getting more attention but not understanding why it didn't. Then yesterday both BBC and Sky News reported it in a lot more detail than they had done previously, so that was good. How do you stop it going away? How do you keep it live? How do you keep it front and centre? Answer, that's your job, James. You're supposed to come up with the ways in which to turn this story into a conversation that we can have together. And I'm about to. What? I mean, and it has to be genuine. You can't ring in and... Well, actually, the problem with Boris Johnson is that the difference between silly and serious is non-existent, isn't it? It could easily contain evidence of shenanigans of any kind, really, or flavour. But if they've got all the other WhatsApps, then wouldn't they have his as well? So if you've got Rishi Sunak's phone, Rishi Sunak's WhatsApps, wouldn't you have all of the exchanges that Rishi Sunak had with Boris? So anyway, there's lots of questions here, but the one I'm asking now is this. What do you think they're all so scared of? Why would the Cabinet Office not want these messages to be handed to the inquiry? What do you think is going to be there? And it has to be at least 52% serious, all right? 0345 6060 973. Why is this phone not being handed over? There's two elements to the question. Why did the Cabinet Office go to court to try and keep all the messages secret? And why have they still not handed over Boris Johnson's phone, the actual Prime Minister at the time, the man at the centre of the story, the ringmaster, the absolute fulcrum of all of it? And an inquiry into whether the government let us down or not. Could you imagine that? This is another one of those. We can't do this every day, can we? Just have phone-ins about why the rest of the media isn't doing the things that we think they should be doing because we think they're important and apparently they don't. I know why Johnson gets a free pass. It's because he's been fetishised by huge swathes of the British media, client journalists everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's client journalists who spent the last few years tickling Boris Johnson's tummy while the country's been slowly burning. But what on earth could be on the phone that they are so desperate to keep from the inquiry? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What could it be? What could it be? 11 minutes after 11 is the time. You'll remember why it got turned off in 2021. It's because it turned out that the number had been in the public domain for the best part of a decade, or more than a decade, since when he was a shadow education minister. And no one had noticed. They put his mobile phone on the bottom of a press release that you could still, I think it was Popbitch actually, the gossip website, brilliant gossip website, that found his mobile phone. You could have rung it yourself and he'd have picked it up. Madness, really, but all part of the image, all part of the chaotic image. Considerably more important is the question of why the phone that was used during crucial periods of the COVID pandemic has not been handed over. It's currently with his lawyers. And what has been bizarre about the coverage, here, is no one, as far as I know, has been able to confirm or deny that this security question is kosher. The idea that it can't be turned on because of a security risk. With Boris Johnson, and I say this advisedly, I should have said it sooner, but you're always conscious of the old rules, even when you're playing a game with new rules. And Boris Johnson is new rules. He's like Donald Trump, he's new rules. And everybody else carried on playing by the old rules, and that's why they got away with absolute madness. Absolute lies, the weaponising, the normalising of lies on a scale that we have never seen before and will hopefully never see again on both sides of the Atlantic. Everyone else is still playing by the old rules, you know? And so you want to say, well, it's highly unlikely that the actual Prime Minister would be talking absolute twaddle, but it's not with Boris Johnson. It's highly likely that his version of events is nonsense. It's what finally did for him. As an MP, he'd already gone as a Prime Minister for different sorts of lies. What finally did for him as an MP was the fact that he will lie anywhere to anyone, up to and including at the dispatch box in the House of Commons, barefaced lies. So this idea that the security services have got involved or that the phone is a security risk of some sort, that's halfway around the world now, and the truth hasn't got its trousers on, possibly. Possibly. Is anyone listening to this programme qualified technologically? I don't think you're likely to ring in if you're second desk at MI6. But technologically, what could the security risk actually be? Because with Johnson, it's not like normal politics. You sort of think, Jenrick yesterday, right, saying that we took down the murals because all of the children, most of the children were teenagers. And that falls apart in his hands. That's what you might call, and it's a base lie, but it's what you might call an easy lie. You can see that lie right in front of you. Why is he lying? To get himself out of trouble. Johnson's lies are different. Johnson's lies, he doesn't even know they're lies. They're not like trying to get yourself out of trouble. They're just getting through the next hour, through the next news cycle, through the next day. It is not even close to being beyond the realms of possibility that this whole security angle is nonsense. But I've not seen anyone picking up on it, partly because it hasn't been properly reported and partly because it's Johnson and we're still playing by the old rules. But can anyone confirm that here's my phone, right? I'm Prime Minister. Here's my phone. In May of 2021, it was reported that my phone number had accidentally been in the public domain for the last 10 years. Okay? So I turned it off. And now I can never turn it on again because of security risks. I am going in on this. So if I am inflating a balloon that bursts before 12 noon today, on my head be it. But is that really plausible? Here's my phone. I've been using it for 15 years, the same number. The number's been in the public domain for 10 of them. Oh, oops-a-daisy, I better turn it off. And now I can never turn it on again because of security reasons. Security reasons. What would the risk be? 0345 6060 973. And crucially, what do you think they are all, because even as Johnson says he's happy to disclose any relevant material to the inquiry when it's accessible, I don't think he is happy. If he was, he would. And he hasn't. So start the clock, right? Either they're going to start, either we're 5 minutes away from, or 5 days away from a claim that, we can't remember the code, we can't get into our phone, and the security thing goes out the window. Or someone rings in and explains to us why the security question is actually pertinent. And ridiculous though it sounds, it would be far too risky to turn back on the phone that he turned off in May 2021 for reasons. And third, what could be in there? What could be in there that they're so desperate to keep away from us? 0345 6060 973. Fill your boots. It is 19 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the failure of Boris Johnson to hand over his phone, full of WhatsApp messages from the earliest days of the lockdown and the COVID pandemic, is finally getting some of the attention that many of us felt it should have been receiving from 4 o'clock on Monday when the deadline for handing it over expired. But questions. What are they so frightened of, in your opinion? What do we think of this claim that he can't turn it on for security reasons? And that has to be a bit more than opinion. You need a little bit of expertise there. And on we go, 19 after 11. Tony's in Lancing. Tony, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello,
Tony. I think you might have almost hit the nail on the head with the fact that...
First time for everything, Tony? First time for everything?
There you go. The fact that they've already got WhatsApps from other members of the government is interesting, in my opinion, because maybe they haven't handed them all over, and there are WhatsApps on Johnson's phone they do not want to reveal from other members of the government.
Because people had second phones.
Yeah.
And Johnson was too arrogant and stupid to bother.
Yeah, so there might be things on that phone that they haven't revealed that they know about, and they do not want that phone to go into the domain of the inquiry. So,
it's fine because we had two phones. We had the phone, the official phone, because we know that one day everything might have to be handed over, and then we had the unofficial phone. But Johnson only ever had one phone because he's the big dog and he doesn't think he needs to worry, because he never has worried about anything in his life. Because when he gets caught, when he gets caught, he lies his way out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, he's not worried about what's on the phone particularly because he doesn't care about anyone else.
Well, then why isn't he handing it over then?
Because he's worried about stuff about him on that phone. So it's a double-edged sword.
Because he's got all... Hey, I tell you what would be funny. Keith just pointed out he was supposed to be having technology lessons, wasn't he, a few years ago off one of his mistresses? Why didn't this come up? Why didn't he say to her, what's going on with what? So he's got his personal stuff on there. There's scandalous stuff on there, which is why he doesn't want it coming out. And then there's exchanges with members of government who were using second phones, cheeky phones. So they've handed theirs over, but if he hands his over, then they'll see everything else that you might be heading towards the top of the class there, Tony.
Well, thank you very much. But I was led by you, though, what you said about the other app.
The other people, the other ones who have apparently handed over a phone, but not necessarily all of the... What about the security angle of it? What about... Because I'm pretty sure if you've got no reception anywhere, then you can turn your phone on, can't you?
Surely, if I don't think, is WhatsApp online or is it on the phone? I don't know. But if it's online, they might have a slight issue.
It's all backed up in the cloud, but it can only back up when it's got a signal.
Yeah. So they could put it in a room with like a lead line room and open it up, couldn't they?
They could use my downstairs toilet, actually. Can't get a signal in there for love or money. Thank you, Tony. It's Dave's in Winchester. Dave, what do you reckon?
Hello. By profession, I am a security consultant, and one of the things we often find is that the bottom line is that people in businesses don't want security to be the reason they can't do something. They're always trying to find a reason around the security. But in this case, we're seeing that security is the actual excuse or reason why it can't be done. Now, I find that very strange.
Yes.
Now, as you just heard, the lead line room, what we would typically call that is a Faraday cage.
Yes, I am familiar with that phraseology.
Exactly.
We all are. We all did it in physics.
Yeah, exactly. If you just really keep it really simple, if it's got no SIM card in, if it's got no eSIM, or if it's got no Wi-Fi, what is the risk?
A few people are suggesting that the Pegasus spyware could be on it, but if you remove the SIM card and then put it in a Faraday room, then you're golden, right?
Exactly. And the thing is typically when we look at risks, we try to break it down into 3, sometimes 4 different areas. Confidentiality, i.e. what's the risk to it being lost?
Yes.
Integrity, is the data on there can be corrupted? Well, we've got tools to be able to take snapshots, backups, things like that. So, if you turn it on and suddenly a threat actor from another country or something like that wipes the device, doesn't matter because, that's not a problem. Or availability, well, the device isn't being used anyway. We don't need the device to be available. Or the sort of unicorn that kind of sits in this as well is privacy. And that's where the risk is that because there's stuff on there that, the owner doesn't want to be shared.
Well, that's him, though. That's not the security services, is it?
No. And as I say, when I'm talking to, business customers about this, security, they want security to allow them to be able to do their job. They never want the security to be the barrier. So security being put up as an excuse is the age-old sort of can't do that because, health and safety.
So were you, I don't know how closely you've been following this, were you surprised when you heard this being offered up as a reason why the phone couldn't be turned back on?
The thing is he was probably told, you can't turn it on because of security, but that was probably a fleeting statement that was just said in conversation or, at the time. But if this is actually accurate, it is not confidential material to share a redacted threat assessment, which is what the security services would do to say this is the identified threat.
Also, as far as I'm aware, no one from the security services has backed this up, either on the record or off the record.
No.
Because it is, I think the technical term is it's a load of old rollicks.
Exactly. That is exactly the term.
Thank you. And what about, because this, I don't know actually, I probably should know, and you may not know either, it's probably a bit below your pay grade, but if I didn't have facial recognition or thumbprint recognition on my phone and I actually forgot the passcode, does that mean the phone could never be opened again?
No. One of the things they often do.
Even Keith is shaking his head, Dave. So I don't think you're going to win a bonus for this one.
Yeah, but so what you can do is you can take a snapshot of what is actually on the device. And yes, there are some security things on there, but you can take a snapshot of the device. You can basically brute force it and then revert it back to the state it was before you did that. So if you think about the PIN code is typically 4 digits long, that's 1,000 tries. And actually a piece of hardware just came out literally just this last week that you can buy that it makes it really easy to do, where it says that it can do it in an hour and a half.
So, this is Johnson all over, isn't it? All the years that I've been covering him, the longer the conversation goes on, the more likely it becomes that we're talking about a massive lie.
Oh, yeah. But as I say, he probably was told
by someone.
That, But if someone, potentially one of the security services, that the advice is
not even that, because he takes a little kernel and turns it into a cake. So someone probably said to him, "You better turn that off now," because it's been in the public domain for the last 10 years, and he's spun that like he always spins things into, "Oh, I can't turn it back on again." But the reason they told him to turn it off was because it could have been anyone could have had the details, and there could have been all sorts of things.
Yeah, so it is a pretext that he's using in this case,
exactly.
And actually. Yeah, and if you think that typically these people, and I use that very generically, but people who have a public role like that do often use them because maybe not in your role, but maybe in many business roles, you either carry 2 devices where one's work, one's personal. Yeah. Whereas he's been living in this phone for so much time that there is a lot of material on there that would be scary to do that.
But I'm with you. I think. Go on, carry on, finish.
Yeah, but the last thing I would say is that, the good resolution to this is because, yes, whilst we might have feelings, that feel like we should be criticising him for this, he does have a right to privacy on some of his private material.
Which is why the inquiry wouldn't publicise anything that wasn't pertinent to their investigations.
Yeah, or
that's up to her. That's up to the ex-judge. That's up to no. She's a retired judge. She is the third party.
There we go.
Thank you, Dave. These great calls today, because now we've got with Tony and Dave, we've got it all covered. So he probably didn't. They probably carried a second phone, most of them. So they've handed over the first phone, and Johnson wouldn't have done, would he? A, because he's such a mess. He'd have forgotten. He'd have used the wrong one. It wouldn't have made any difference anyway. And B, because of his hubristic arrogance. I don't need to use a second phone. Why should I do it? It's ridiculous. You do it if you want, Hancock. I'm far too important. So everyone else hands over their official phones. The inquiry goes through the WhatsApps. Okay, nothing to see here. It's all fairly straightforward. Even though the Cabinet Office tried to hold back some of it. But Johnson's phone could have all the juice on it. And then factor in Dave's testimony that, as a security expert, it's just a load of old Rolex, that he can't turn it back on again. What are you left with? You're left with a much, much, much bigger story than it is still being treated as. Could be wrong, as I said. I've inflated a balloon. If it bursts in my face, then on my head be it. But it's looking a little rum, wouldn't you say? A little rum? Thomas is in Stirling. Thomas, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I hope you're keeping well.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you for having me on. The previous caller was correct. I work for the government, and I have also had engagements with the MOD, including Bristol, as part of my job. There are electronically sealed rooms. I have to be careful what I say. I hope you can appreciate that, James. But there are electronically sealed rooms at various locations all over the UK where these phones can be opened securely by the relative people in the security services. And like your previous caller was quite rightly in saying, it can be brute force unlocked. Everything is not encrypted. Even this fallacy that WhatsApp is encrypted is incorrect. It's encrypted for 24 hours, and then backup servers take the encrypted data and load it onto their servers, which then can be accessible to anyone upon request legally. But yes, the opening of the phone is a fallacy. It can be done in various secure locations.
We're pretty close to going definitive on this. But even if it couldn't, if what would they be frightened of? What would it? I mean, what would the
truth?
Pardon?
The truth,
no, not the truth.
No,
No, that's the second question. The first question is, what would they be frightened of happening? So it would be like a rogue player or an enemy agent would be able, the minute he turns it on, would be able to suck all the data from his phone and use it for nefarious purposes. That's what they would ostensibly be worried about, but that is a non-existent worry, because you can do it in a way that would prevent anybody from being able, even if they had managed to insinuate some software onto the phone, they wouldn't be able to access the contents of the phone if it was opened in the way that you've described.
You're absolutely right, James. They're scared of what was said, which was probably the truth from their perspective. They've been untoward in their approach,
making jokes,
and that's what's going to come out. But no, just to confirm what you were saying, James.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It can be opened securely in secure rooms at any location around the UK, especially I'd like to say the MOD in Bristol. That's not anything untoward. There are loads of electronically sealed rooms around the country where this can be opened.
Thank you, Thomas.
The nefarious nature of external parties could then be, how can I put this, can be omitted, and then it can be done safely, and we can see the evidence on the phone. It's a load of rubbish.
Rolex is the technical term, Thomas.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Thomas. I mean, it just does sound completely copper-bottomed, doesn't it? This rejection of the idea that he can't turn it on for security purposes. So we've rejected the idea that he could claim he'd forgotten the code. I hope he doesn't lose his thumb. I hope that one doesn't come true. If you were listening at the top of the hour, you heard me suggest I wouldn't put it past Boris Johnson to claim that he could only open it with his thumb, and he's lost his thumb, would you believe, chaps? 31 after 11. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It's 11:34, so we're making a little bit of progress together. It's a phone-in, all right? So we're not MI6 or anything like that, but it would appear that you have nothing to fear from turning your phone back on. And it would appear that Johnson's explanation for not handing his phone over is bogus. That's what it would appear, which adds even more weight to the question of why what are they so scared of? And that includes the Cabinet Office. It's not just him. And the early answer to that, of course, was brilliant. They could have deleted exchanges that he hasn't deleted, or they could have used second phones, burner phones, that Johnson didn't bother using, you know? There's big ministerial code stuff here, because that's what Suella Braverman got done for, was sending an email from her personal account instead of her government account. I presume that requirement extends to telecommunications devices, that you got your government phone. You can't be sending messages between ministries. There was some trouble. I'd read, this is it, you know. I remember that during the PPE reporting, something else that if it was a Labour government, we'd know a hell of a lot more about than we do under a Tory government. But the PPE stuff, the idea that some of them were using their phones to set up PPE deals, but they weren't using their government phones, which means it's not on the record, it's not on the books. That's what this story's going to be about, isn't it? Come on. Come at me now if you think no. You think, oh, get off it. Why are you always picking on Boris? That's what this work. Otherwise, you've got to answer the question. All right? You've got to answer the question. What are they so scared of? What are they all so scared of? We've already, I think, answered the question of whether or not there's anything to fear, whether or not there's any mileage in the thingamy. But what are they trying to keep hidden? 11:36 is the time. Benjamin's in Kings Lynn. Benjamin, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, you always pick on Boris. Oh.
Behave, get on with it.
So, I've had some experience in cybersecurity. Nothing, say, massively fanciful or anything like that. Just an online retraining course. But I'd just like to sort of offer a little bit of the other side where these potential worries could come from.
Go on then.
Because realistically speaking, as soon as you turn on your phone and your little RF transmitter, which actually connects to the network, starts pinging towers, if you're close enough to more than, say, 2 of them, they could realistically triangulate where you are. And I understand what previous callers have said in regards to having these sealed rooms that can block all signals. And that's totally fair. But to sort of say that, just turning a phone back on has no potential consequences is maybe sort of like a little bit lax in terms of
come
security.
off it. You know where the phone is. It's in your flipping hand when you turn it on. So there's no mystery about where he is. He's on the telly half the time. He's right. I mean, if that's it, if it's just and of course, finally, the circumstances in which Tony and Dave have described, you turn it, or Dave in particular, you turn it on in those circumstances, it's not going to ping anywhere. It's going to be pingless. Unpinging.
Oh, sure, definitely. Yeah, and I totally agree.
Because for normal people, you might say, "Oh, don't turn your phone on if you don't want anyone to know where you are." But this is about presumably hundreds, if not thousands, of messages that they're not sharing with the inquiry, with the official inquiry, which was called by the actual government. That's not sharing the actual information, and the excuse that we're being given is that he can't turn the phone on for security reasons. It just doesn't wash.
Yeah, and that's where it drives me absolutely mad, because I use WhatsApp on the daily.
Yeah,
I used to use it at my previous workplace. Even when I was working as a civil servant, I used to use it. And no, I don't have I don't have anything dodgy on my WhatsApp or anything like that.
That's what they all say.
But the thing that caught me off guard is the fact that there seems to be this definitive link between not having access to that phone and not being able to use WhatsApp. I learned recently that you can just download the app. If you've got a Windows PC, you could just download their app.
Yeah.
And you can just log in straight in there. Most of the time, you don't even need the handset.
Your phone's got to be near your computer for that to work, doesn't it?
Not necessarily.
I think I'm not very good at this stuff.
When I did it, at least, when I did it, at least I thought, I'll have to scan the QR code like before. But no, it just sort of let me in for whatever reason. I'm assuming that was just sort of a one-off for me.
No, so just the more we talk about it, the more ridiculous this becomes, and the failure to investigate it or report it properly becomes ever more disappointing. I'm not going to say suspicious, because it's a bit tinfoil hatty, but it's very, very disappointing, isn't it? It's a Prime Minister, the most important person in the whole inquiry, withholding information for reasons that the scantest scrutiny renders spurious.
And the thing that really does concern me the most, though, is the fact that the reason that during the early 2000s that everyone used BlackBerries within the government is because that was relatively secure.
Right.
A lot of the encrypted information was only held on the handset. There was no
I don't believe it. Stop talking. Guess what's just happened?
Go on.
What? Get the tape. What did I say at the top of this hour, Benjamin? What did I say was going to happen next?
Bursting.
What did I say was going to happen next?
No, not his thumb.
Not his thumb, the other bit. The bit that wasn't a joke. The bit that I said the next excuse we get will be...
I didn't catch that bit.
Oh, come on. Peter is on the wheel. Tell me you can remember. What did I say the excuse would be by tea time today, Peter?
They can't get it unlocked.
Yeah! The Times has just reported Boris Johnson has been unable to give the COVID inquiry WhatsApp messages from his old iPhone because he has forgotten the passcode. Boom!
Marvellous.
You couldn't make it up. That's literally there. Government security experts are trying to establish if they can stop the iPhone erasing itself if the passcode is wrong. Get the tape. Get the clip, because people won't believe me. That's a new record. I even said that my prediction, I was a bit cocky, Peter. I said my predictions have been perfect since 2016. That's what he will come out with next. It is now 11:41. I did it before 11:15. I've done it in less than half an hour.
Yep.
Right, you can all go home. I'm taking the rest of the day off. Peter, what did you ring in to say?
For me, James, obviously following this story, if you take aside all the things of can we get into the phone, can we not, can we do?
Yes.
I believe this is more about national security, but about the failures of national security. And if we look at chronologically, I cannot believe or understand that the security services would not have been looking at Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary.
Well, he wasn't given full clearances, was he? Because they were worried about...
That's worried. But they had that. I mean, as a security service, they are looking I believe they are looking all the time at incidents like this. And then he puts the Lebanon in the House of Lords. Again, it's only links and it's only speculation.
There could be all sorts on there, couldn't there?
Absolutely. But what I think it might be is, and I think it comes back to a bit like, and I'm going to go right back to Edward VII, where Scotland Yard were actually investigating and monitoring him. But it was never put out into the public until 50, 60 years after he died.
They're always keeping an eye on things, aren't they? Always keeping an eye on potential threats, even if it's just people's personality that is the risk, rather than their politics or their plans.
But I think, James, what might be the case, and then again, this is how the higher echelons work, is if it came about that there was something nefarious going on, even if Johnson didn't know about it, because it's quite natural to understand that Johnson wouldn't know he was being used. But if that was the case, and we as the public say to the security services, hang on, you knew this about our Prime Minister and didn't tell us.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Okay. You've added an extra dimension of murk. So you're suggesting the security services may not want the stuff to come out because it may implicate them in some way for being remiss in not reporting or acting on information they were aware of. Is that what you're saying? Is it, Peter?
Did it?
What happened then?
With BAC. He stopped the BAC financial institution investigation by saying, sorry, it's national security.
Okay, I don't remember that, but I'm happy to take your word for it. So have we got the time? Have we got the time that I said it this morning? Is it... So at about 5 minutes past 11 today, I'm sorry for getting so excited about this. I'm just relieved he hasn't lost his thumb. That would have been so embarrassing, wouldn't it? So quite breathtaking, really, that at approximately 5 minutes past 11 today, i.e. fewer than 40 minutes ago, right, I said this. Inevitably, he said that he would have full cooperation and happy to disclose any material. But I think we might be coming close to the point Don't shoot me down if I get this one wrong, all right? You know what my predictions are like. Pretty close to perfect lately. Well, since 2016, really. But how surprised would you be if the next chapter of this story involves nobody being able to remember the passcode? 11:04, right? Give or take? Sorry, 11:05 and 34 seconds. 11:05 and 34 seconds. You can rewind live radio. There's never been a more exciting time to rewind live radio on the Global Player app. 11:05 and 34 seconds, I said that. And then at 11:41, Stephen Swinford at The Times reports exclusively that Boris Johnson has been unable to give the COVID inquiry WhatsApp messages from his old iPhone because he has forgotten the passcode. This is the only programme in Britain where you get the news before it has actually happened. It's 11:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where you get the news before it happens. So absolutely unbelievable. Sometimes I say something to you about what I think is going to happen next, and I'm quite a good student of Boris Johnson in particular and Brexit in general. For example, I could have said to you yesterday that I wouldn't be surprised if Nadine Dorries had asked Simon Case to try and get her on Liz Truss's resignation honours list after she failed to get the one that Boris Johnson had promised her. But you'd think, don't be ridiculous. Even Nadine Dorries wouldn't stoop that low and be that pathetic. Well, stand by for Dorries watch, because I didn't predict that. But I did predict that Boris Johnson would claim that he'd forgotten his passcode for his phone. As the attention finally and belatedly arrived at his failure to hand it over at 4:00 on Monday. Gosh, what a tangled web we weave. Anyway, back to the actual phone-in, as opposed to the mystic meggery. No, I don't know what the lottery numbers are for next Saturday. And no, I don't think that I gave him the idea by suggesting it on the radio today, but I fully accept the 500 people who are all making that joke in my inbox. I've now made it myself on Twitter. But anyway, the point I was making is that often these predictions come true. I don't remember the last time one came true that quickly. And the trick is, if you're wondering, or if you're new to the programme, I've been watching Johnson like a hawk for years. I've been plotting and describing every element of his personal and professional depravity since the moment I realised, about 10 minutes after voting for him to be Mayor of London in 2008, that he was utterly undeserving and unfit for any office at all, never mind the highest in the land. So if you had studied him and followed him as closely as I have, you would have made exactly the same prediction. Possibly not 38 minutes before it actually happened. 36 minutes before it actually happened. Or at least before the Times broke the story of it happening. Anthony's in Bletchley Park. Anthony, what would you like to say? It's quite appropriate
Morning,
location,
James.
Isn't it?
It is indeed. Related to what one of your previous callers said, I don't think the cabinet panic attack is actually connected to the COVID inquiry. The Oakshott WhatsApp turned into be a bit of a damp squid. And if you look at the terms of reference for Lady Hallett, they're going to be able to go through that phone like a dose of salt. There might well be other messaging apps on that phone, like Signal, secure messaging apps.
Yes.
And I'm thinking fairly concernedly that what they are worried about is that the Lady Hallett might find information that could actually raise national security or criminal issues, and then she would be bound to pass it to the security service or the Met Police. Now, he might be able to weather the COVID storm, but he's never going to be able to weather a storm where there are real issues of strategic national security, and I'm thinking specifically the Russians here.
Yes.
And of course, if there are communications, and this is speculation, and I'm not going to drag us down legal rabbit holes, but if there were to be linkages to be discovered with people who are state actors who are inimical to the UK, and he has communicated with them.
Well, Lebedev's dad is sanctioned now in Canada and Ukraine, of course.
Indeed, and the other members of the Five Eyes community would be less than impressed if they thought that the UK Foreign Secretary, shortly after a meeting of NATO, went off for a booze-up in Tuscany without his security detail, clutching folders full of notes. Who knows what might have either been photographed accidentally, what might have been passed, what might have been sent to a junk moment.
While we're speculating, do you read Mick Herron's books?
Yeah, all of them. Love them.
So we haven't read the latest because it's not out yet, but I have got it. I've got an early. I'm not showing off. I'm just because
You are.
You're absolutely right. I am, of course, but for a reason, Anthony. For a reason. That's crucial. Because he. I mean, there's a character in the Slough House books that's clearly based on Boris Johnson, but
yes.
arguably even. I mean, he's genuinely far right, isn't he? In a way that Johnson isn't, but he'll flirt with anyone if he thinks there's a quid in it for him. But he's clearly the new book is based very, very, very recently, very modern, and it does posit the existence of a foreign secretary who I think ended up getting fired by the Prime Minister after it emerged that one of his dubious friends had said that he was putting a dating app on his phone, and the dating app would have obviously been hiding something much more sinister that would have allowed the dubious friend access to every exchange that was going on. And that's just fiction, but Mick's ex-job, isn't he? He's ex-Secret Services, and it obviously keeps his ear to the ground. And it could be anything with Johnson, couldn't it? It could be absolutely anything.
It is. The dating app's interesting because from my previous experience is that foreign intelligence services use dating apps because soldiers who are overseas or government officials who are overseas on operations are looking for girlfriends. They go online and put who they are and where they are, and then people trawl through it and discover that there are soldiers in countries where there shouldn't be soldiers. So that's not the slightest bit far-fetched.
No.
But if going back to my thesis about the Russian issue, or potential Russian issue, if you look at the famous Russian report, which was actually completed in May 2019, but the ex-Prime Minister only approved its release on the 13th of December, which was, surprise, surprise, the day after the general election.
Yes.
But then it wasn't actually then released until July 20 during COVID, which, being blunt, was a very good time to bury bad news along with thousands of people. Thanks, Mr. Johnson.
I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? Once it starts unravelling, he is such a unique figure that even relatively sensible people like you and me we'd probably be open to the idea of almost anything happening on his watch.
And I think that the reason I think my thesis holds water is that the one thing that Johnson can't afford to lose, and you're going to laugh hollowly at this is my prediction, is his reputation, because that's how he's trying to make money.
Yeah, of course.
And I suspect that rumbling around the back of his mind is good old Shakespeare, and I shall show off I can remember my A-level English, where he had Cassius saying, reputation, reputation, I have lost my reputation, I have lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial. My reputation, Iago, my reputation. And I suspect there's an awful lot behind that, because if the information that is found on that phone is proof positive, which might be,
and it's all over for him. You're not going to get your $1 million speeches off a bank in America if you really are coated by the contents of your own phone.
Yeah, and if you work on the thesis that history is written by winners, how do you think history is going to treat Johnson when they look back on his tenure as Foreign Secretary, tenure as Prime Minister, dubious things that have happened? He is going to be written down as a total stain on British democracy, and that legacy is going to poison his family line forevermore.
Funny you should say that, Anthony. Chapter 8 of How They Broke Britain, out on November the 2nd. Boris Johnson.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, have a signed copy, please?
Of course you can. That'd be my pleasure. No, it really would. It's coming up to 11:57. It might be Chapter 7. I haven't decided yet. The order is still a little bit up in the air. Might be Chapter 9 as well. I'm going to have to add a bit now about predicting the... No, I'm not. That'd be too self-referential. And you know me, shrinking violet. Keith's in Stroud. Keith.
Hi, James. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll be very brief.
Good man.
I've got a layman's opinion on what's on Johnson's phone that our wonderful current government don't want getting into the hands of the inquiry team. And that would be communications either by phone or text to handsets, probably owned by people with initials, JRM, MH, RS, etc. And if that was proven that they have been using second personal phones for government business, it would cause absolute carnage.
Well, it's ministerial code territory, I think. We were speculating on this earlier, because if you get into trouble for sending an email from your personal account, like Suella Braverman had to or got fired for, it would presumably be the same with WhatsApps.
Yeah. And if it's proven that government ministers, etc., who were requested to hand over their official phones...
Hadn't handed over all of it.
Hadn't handed unofficial phones that they've been conducting business on, then that will cause absolute carnage.
And that takes us back to Matt Hancock, doesn't it? And everyone's saying, well, he's already handed over all of his, but what if he only gave one phone to his? I'm not suggesting for a minute, I'm just speculating and thinking out loud, but the possibility that there may have been another WhatsApp account somewhere or another phone somewhere that was was not handed over and then leaked. Very. I
just think that if it is proven eventually that a lot of these people have been using personal phones for government chat,
then everything's up. Everything's up. I'm going to crack on. You mentioned the time. I'm going to squeeze in Dave in Hyde because I think you're a policeman, Dave, and you're going to make a point that quite a few texters have made since this story broke at 11:41. What is it?
Well, I'm not a policeman, but I do know the law.
Yes.
And there's a law, the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act 2000. Yeah. And this is served on anybody when the police want to get access to their phone. And you serve a Section 49 notice on them, and that if you fail to disclose your PIN or password, you commit a separate offence for which a term of imprisonment of 6 months is applicable, except in the case of national security or child indecency, when the maximum term of imprisonment increases to 5 years.
Oh, my days. So there it is. Because otherwise, of course, if you're trying to investigate a crime, and it's a drug dealer, say, and you say, give me your phone, and the drug dealer says, I've forgotten my passcode, every criminal in the country would be claiming that they'd forgotten their passcode.
It's used primarily for drug dealers.
Well, I bet it is for that reason, because you can see them saying 5 grams at 4 o'clock, please, or something like that. And so it is actually an offence not to provide your passcode.
Yes, it's an offence. Term of imprisonment 6 months, or in the case of national security, 5 years.
Well, I'll bake him a cake. Thank you, Dave. That story, that was 11:41. That was 18 of the most exciting minutes that I think we've ever spent together on the radio. It's absolutely remarkable. I told you yesterday morning at 10 o'clock that we should be talking about this stuff instead of Hugh Edwards, didn't I? I told you, literally, word for word. I said, I'm sure this stuff is more important. And then I couldn't find a way of talking about it. So I went home last night and thought, we've got to talk about it. We've got to talk about it tomorrow. How are we going to talk about it? I think we can all agree that we found a relatively successful and fertile way of talking about it. Of course, it's Thursday, and it's just turned 12 noon, which can mean only one thing. What a fun-packed show this has been. And now, like the cherry on the icing on the cake, it's Mystery Hour after this.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mystery Hour, slightly different from the rest of the week. If you're just tuning in, for next week's lottery numbers or predictions about what's going to be in the news headlines a week on Friday even, then bad luck. This is not that part of the programme. This is fun. Fun and frolics, you might describe it as. What happens is, right, someone rings in and asks a question, and then someone else rings in and answers it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sounds a bit rubbish. Or even, perhaps worse, sounds a bit North Norfolk digital. You'd be wrong. Something happens. It's like alchemy. It's like radio alchemy. Something happens in the ether during that process of someone asking a question and then someone answering it. We quite like wrong answers. We should start bringing wrong answers back, actually, because otherwise the board game doesn't work. What's that I hear you say? There's a board game? I'll tell you more after this. Not only is there a board game, but you can win one by being my favourite contributor of the week. If you are not lucky enough to do that, then you can buy one at mysteryhour.co.uk. It's all there. Have a look on Amazon. Loads and loads and loads of beautiful reviews, and a few fake ones by racists. That's always one of the adornments of my Amazon offerings, is that a few racists like to go on there with fake 1-star reviews. But they're actually quite funny, accidentally funny. So even they're worth a look at sometimes. But you can tell the real ones. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Is that everything? Oh, terms and conditions apply. And you can find them at lbc.co.uk. There it is. Let's just get it up and running. I can tell I got a bit overexcited. I thought that was incredible. And this is actually, give me a minute, all right? Because this is why I was telling you about Twitter. I don't know what the BBC was playing at on that phone story. They got to it late, 48 hours too late, but they did get to it eventually. And I wonder whether the number of people on social media who were saying, why are we not talking about Boris Johnson's phone, actually did move the dial. I'm normally very sceptical and even perhaps dismissive of that kind of theory. Not a big fan of dead cats. I love live cats, but not a big fan of dead cats. It doesn't usually work like that. But that's slightly different, just to suggest that something hadn't really made its way very far up the news list at the BBC. And then Twitter, yesterday in particular, was very, very, very rightly wondering why there hadn't been more coverage of the phone. And then lo and behold, late yesterday, there was more coverage of the phone, which kind of forces Boris Johnson's hand. Because if the story's not being reported, he doesn't have to come up with another excuse for not handing it over. But the story has been reported. And he's come up with another excuse for not handing it over. And, I mean, good God, it's a pathetic excuse, but it's evidence that the story has not been allowed to go away. And I think, somewhat embarrassingly for a media establishment that has been talking about little but Hugh Edwards for the last 5 days, it was social media that propelled that story forwards, I think. Could be wrong. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Let's get this up and running. Peter is in Peterborough. That's rather felicitous. Question or answer, Peter?
Well, not wanting to break with tradition, I'll start with a question for you, James.
Good man. Carry on.
Right. I'm of a similar vintage to you, and I played a lot of football when I was younger, jumpers for goalposts and all that.
Yeah.
If I kicked a normal football with the inside of my right foot, the ball would spin and curve to the left. But I noticed if I did exactly the same thing with a plastic football, the ball would curve to the right, and I've never understood why.
And I mean, when did you last attempt this?
Oh, probably about 20 years ago in the park with my kids.
Well, I mean, are we sure? You can't put spin on a plastic ball, really.
Yeah, you could. You used to go to the fairs and you'd get those orange and black balls.
Yeah, if they've got dimples on them, you can put a bit of spin. But I was thinking about the friction, and it's the weight. The leather ball is much heavier than the plastic ball. But you think it's exactly the same kick skews to the left with a leather ball and to the right with a plastic ball.
And it can only be down to the material it's made of, in my opinion. But I'm very willing to find out what others say.
Well, it must be that, but whether or not it's simply because it's so light, or whether or not it's because of the way it interacts with the boot, or well, I hope you're right. Because what if you're wrong? What if it's just you and your weird foot?
It could be down to me and my weird foot. I mean, it'll match with the rest of my body.
8 minutes after 12. William's in Purley. William, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
I'd be amazed if you can give me the answer, if someone can, because I've asked about 20 people this question. Nobody seems to be able to give me a sensible answer.
Go on, then.
I'm trying to find out what causes us to slow down as we get older. I can never understand how Christina Hurricane went from being the Olympic champion in the 400 metres in Beijing in 2008, and a mere 8 years later, in 2016, she couldn't qualify for the final. I mean, what happened to her body in those 8 years that she slowed down so much?
Oh, it's wear and tear.
No, but I mean, anyone can say that. Is it your ligaments? Is it your muscles? Is it your bones?
Yes.
Is it everything?
Everything.
What is it?
Everything.
That causes us to slow down as we get older? Is it one thing, one specific thing?
No, it's all the things.
I mean, you ran a 400-metre race against another LBC presenter a few years ago.
We don't talk about that on the radio,
Do
William.
you think you could still do the same time? Or have you slowed down?
It'd be hard for me to be much slower, William. I've got to be honest with you. I don't know how that happened. Now, you've been listening for a long time. Even Keith doesn't know what you're talking about. That was a very odd moment. I had this producer at the time who, I think someone in management had told him to come up with some imaginative ideas. So he decided that me and Ian Lee would have a running race live on my show. And Ian, I think he told me afterwards, he was some sort of cross-country champion or something like that. And so,
well, he moonwalked the last 10 metres, didn't he?
He moonwalked about the last 20 metres, I think, mate. I was still coughing up a lung on the... Oh, that was terrible. Well, no, I mean, it's. I'll put it on the board, but I mean, it's going to be a variation on wear and tear. It's like we talked yesterday about people needing new knees and hips. So if your knee hurts a bit because it's got less fluid in it, less synovial fluid, then you're gonna walk more slowly. You're going to run more slowly, and it's just your muscles are going to get a bit less. You know, it's wear and tear, isn't it, William?
I'm just thinking it's the flexibility in your muscles that causes it.
Yeah, well,
Michael
it is.
Michael Jordan used to be able to jump in the air and stay there for about 6 seconds, and as he got older, he stopped doing it.
It's everything.
Your muscles
it just
stiffer.
It just wears out. It just wears out. But I mean, why? The why of it. A proper answer. There'll be a proper academic answer. Why do we slow down as we get older? But you're a bit unfair on Christina Hurricane, though. I think. I mean, She was still one of the fastest people in the world, even when she wasn't qualifying for the Olympics.
Well, that's my point in case. How did she slow down so much in the space of 8 years? She went from being the greatest 400 metre in the world to not being able to make it in the space of a lousy
Only
8
to the
years. It doesn't make
finals. She
sense.
was in the semi-final. She might have had a bad day. But I take with the broader question of why do we get slower as we get older? Well, actually, not quite, is there? Because there must be a point, there's a tipping point where you peak. Because you're faster at 20 than you were at 10, usually. Thank you, William. I like that. I'm not so fond of the reminders of one of my oddest on-air experiences, but we take the rough with the smooth on this programme. Tony's in Aldershot. Tony, question or answer?
I have a question today, James.
Carry on.
So I was out running with my friend Laura on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
And I get really red-faced and sweat so much through my face.
Oh.
But Laura looks like she could wear a full set of makeup and not sweat. She sweats on her back. Why? Why do I sweat in my face and get bright red?
Perspire. Ladies perspire.
Perspire. Sorry, perspire.
They glow. Men perspire. Ladies glow.
But she... Not
Does she want you to share this with 1.46 million people?
Yes.
She really?
She did, because
Does she know that for the rest of her life she's going to be known as Sweaty Back Laura? Or Laura Sweaty Back?
Because I did say to her, I need to phone on Mystery Hour on James O'Brien. And
Here
she
it comes.
laughed. She knows I'm quite... I listen to the
That
show.
you would do it. Sweaty Back Laura. So why does she sweat through her back while you sweat? I mean, does she wear a full face of makeup when you're running? Because that might be...
Well, no. But there's not... I'll tell you, there is not an ounce of sweat on her face. It looks like...
And how
I've
much,
done a
if you don't mind,
marathon.
I hope this isn't an indiscreet inquiry, but how much sweat is there on your back?
None.
So your back
There
is
is no
dry as a
sweat.
bone.
Yeah.
But your face...
my face is drenched.
Well, there you go. Why do Tony and Laura sweat in different places, really, is the question. But
Yeah, but why?
Yeah, you're on. You're on. Thank you, Tony. Why? We need to know. Sonny's in Ealing. Sonny, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Right. Where is the deepest part of the ocean, and how do they know that? Surely not every nautical mile of the sea has been scoured through.
No, you don't need to. I mean, it's the Mariana Trench, isn't it?
Yes,
have
but
you
how do
heard
they
of
know
that? Is it?
Yeah, I have heard of that. Yeah,
I think it
how
is.
How do they know that?
Well, you don't need to go there to measure it, do you? Couldn't you just sort of shoot some beams down there or something?
Well, this is what I want to know.
Sonar, innit? Sonar. So what's the question? Is that the deepest part of the ocean? Yeah, it is. No, it is, seriously. And how do they know?
How do they know that?
Sonar.
Have they checked every part of-
It's the deepest part of the known. It's the deepest known part of the ocean. So there might be like a mad trench somewhere no one's checked, but it's unlikely. So you just tool around the place with your sonar pinging, and then someone goes, "Blimmin' heck, that's 2.5 kilometres, 200 kilometres. Well, that's deep, that is."
So someone's actually checked.
Well, they've checked that bit, yeah, because they can put a figure on it. What do you mean? It's sonar. It's how owls catch things.
Yeah, I know, but obviously sonar's been in the news recently.
It's that.
And then,
Sonar. It's the Mariana Trench, and it is sonar. And I am taking a round of applause.
No.
Yes, I am.
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced.
Oh, yes. All right, well, I mean, if there's a steward's inquiry, there's a steward's inquiry, Sonny. But the only bit that won't work is the Mariana Trench bit. That may not be the deepest part of the ocean. I know it's the deepest trench, so you have to presume if it's the deepest oceanic trench, it's going to be the deepest part of any ocean, right? You would think. And then the question of how do they know, the answer's got to be sonar, I think. But now I'm patting myself on the back, as ever. Insecurities and doubts begin to creep in, but maybe bit trigger happy there with a round of applause, Keith.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 17 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mystery Hour continues. Why does a football, if it's plastic, you kick it in exactly the same way, and if it's leather, it'll spin to the left. If it's plastic, it'll spin to the right. Why do we slow down as we get older? Why does Tony sweat through her face while her friend Laura sweats through her back on the same run? So it's not meteorological considerations. And I've answered Sonny's question about the deepest part of the ocean, but it may be open to challenge. Martin's on the Wirral. Martin, question or answer?
answer.
Carry on.
Christine Arugu.
Yeah.
Why does she win the Olympics 1 year and not in 4 years' time? Well, I think the first thing we need to understand is that at the sharp end of sport, and certainly the Olympic Games, the difference between success and failure is pretty small.
Yeah.
Therefore, it can be any of a number of reasons. One could be she ate something bad the night before.
Yeah.
It could be the fact she was injured 6 months earlier and she'd only trained for the last 4 weeks and simply she wasn't fit enough. It could be that having won the Olympic Games once, the fire in the belly is not burning as brightly and strongly as it once was.
I think you are correct, and you are picking up on on the opening of William's question, which was specific to Christine.
Yeah.
And part of your answer is that she hadn't actually necessarily got any slower, because you're comparing two moments in time involving the same person. And if she'd run the Olympic winning race the next day, she might have come last. And if she'd done the one where she didn't qualify for the final the day before, she might have come first. So you're speaking, I suspect, from the point of view of an athlete.
Yeah, I used to be one.
Where did you get to? What did you do?
I went to the Olympic Games. 400-metre hurdles, 1984.
That's pretty good.
And I didn't do very well.
Well, you got to the Olympic Games, Martin. Let it go, mate. Let it go. How many people can say they got there? Where was it? Where was it held that year?
Los Angeles. I was only 20. I was but a child. I was a child.
There you go. I'm going to give you a... Do you know what? To make up for it, I'm going to give you...
Make up for what? The fact I didn't do very well?
Yeah, to make up for the disappointment that I can still sense in your voice all these years later, 39 years.
Is this really going to compensate for the fact I've been through hell for the last 40 years?
Yes, God, yes, it is.
Unable to sleep at night.
Yeah, I feel it.
Burdened by the stigma of failure.
Well, it's not failure to get there, is it? But yes, it is. It's going to make up for all of that.
It's not what the chief coach told me.
Did he not?
He told me I bottled it. It was the only thing he said for the entire month I was there.
Are you serious?
I am, yeah.
It's pretty brutal. I mean, was he right? Do you think you did bottle it?
No, I didn't.
You don't know. You just
wasn't good enough.
And also, it came wrong on the day. You could have got a bit. You could have got it. No, a bit better.
I had a dicky knee.
Well, there it is. You had a dicky knee.
But then speak to any athlete, and they will tell you they are injured.
But you won the AAA title that year, didn't you?
I tell you what, it's remarkable, isn't it, that you carry this information.
I have a special bond with my listeners, Martin. I have a special bond with his listeners. I remember
he was on the telly as well, you know.
I remember you tearing around the track at the Royal Grammar School in High Wycombe, where your fellow student Barry Marsden first showed you how to jump over a hurdle.
Barry Marsden, he's been fiddling with the Wikipedia, hasn't he?
I don't know. Oh, has he? Did he not teach you how to jump?
I do remember Barry, actually.
But it had nothing to do with teaching you how to hurdle. He has. You're right. He's claimed that place in posterity on Wikipedia. But as an actual Olympic 400, albeit the hurdles, and Christine was on the flat, I think, and yes, I mean, this will now. I haven't given one out for a while. This will absolutely make up for 40 years of hurt.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
Look at that. Look at that. But you haven't done the biological answer about wear and tear and age generally just withering us.
Oh, yeah. Well, it does, but of course it does. And there's no doubt that without sort of getting too self-indulgent, you do commit a huge amount of yourself, both physically and, dare I say, emotionally. And the reality is there is wear and tear, and I still wake up with a very sore back.
Do you really?
And
because of what you put yourself
I like
through.
to claim. Yeah, seriously, I think it probably is.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But and Christine will suffer, I'm sure, very much the same, particularly when she gets to my age.
Well, I mean, you know, it's there. You did it. French rugby after that, wasn't it? You got into French rugby commentating.
Yeah, I do. That's what I do these days.
Yeah, that's right.
And I used to work on the radio as a talk show presenter as well. Would you believe?
Oh God!
You probably see that as well.
How the mighty have fallen. Take care, Martin. Hey, Martin, give my best to Barry Marston, won't you, when you see him?
He's got more to answer for than I have.
Is it Gillingham or Gillingham? Forgive me, I don't know.
It's Gillingham.
I thought it was. Martin Gillingham there. What a show it's been today. Oh, lovely. There you go. Well-known Olympic legend. Phil's on the whirl. Phil, what would you like to say? Question or answer, even?
Question, James. It's a bit of a when and a little bit of why.
Go on, man.
When did surnames become locked on permanent? And what I mean by that is, imagine back in medieval times, you were known as John the Miller.
Yeah.
If you had a son who became, say, a barrel maker, he might be John the Cooper.
Yeah.
But at some stage, that becomes locked, and all his progeny, the male side anyway, will remain Coopers up till the present day. The same thing could be said of your own name, O'Brien.
Yes.
When you were of Brian at some stage in, let's say, your clan's history.
Clan Baru. Brian Baru.
And then, when or why did we stop using those trade names and son of, and it got locked in, and probably why? There must have been a reason.
I wonder if it was the Doomsday Book.
Well, do you know, I was thinking the same thing, and I think a lot of things come back to taxation and census and stuff. But I don't know. It's just a thing that I've always been interested in names, and particularly surnames.
I like. So when did they happen? When did surnames become a thing for normal people? Because you'd have had them for kings and everything, wouldn't you? Probably.
Oh well, they'd have like a regnal name, but you know, Ethelred the Unready, shall we say, or whatever. There would be a nickname that went with it.
Would they not have a surname? Would they have had a surname?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we got Windsor lately. But
right, you're on. So you want specific to the professions or all surnames?
Well, no, all surnames at one point. I mean, they wouldn't have just said, no, you can't name after a profession anymore. You stuck with it. But you can name yourself after your father. So, it just went, and a little bit of why on that one. Might clear it up for me.
You're on. I like it. 03456060973 is the number you need if you can help fill out. Simon's in Sheffield. Simon, question or answer?
Hi, I've got an answer.
Carry on.
The plastic footballs, why they bend in the opposite way to what you'd expect.
Yeah.
So you may remember World Cup around 2006, 2010, kind of controversy around the footballs that they used. Kind of people thought they kind of wobbled in the air in unexpected ways. Maybe you don't remember that.
No, I do. I do. Of course I do. I mean, you had no idea where the plastic ball was going to go, did you?
Yeah, exactly. And the plastic ball, the one you might buy and kick in the park, kind of wobbles all over the place. It's a similar phenomenon. The balls they made in the world, they're too smooth.
Yeah.
So the stitches, the seams on a football play a very important role in that they kind of mix the air up and make it turbulent. We know about turbulent air from kind of flying in planes. Well, a ball isn't very aerodynamic and a shape, but if you can add roughness to the ball, you make the air turbulent, and actually that sticks to the ball for longer and makes it fly through the air better. So it's why golf balls have dimples.
Oh yeah, of course. I love that.
Yeah, all of these different.
What about
hockey balls have dimples? All of these things are added to the ball to actually improve.
Make it less erratic. Make it less erratic.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's a really good
what's
answer.
Happening, so the complicated thing that's happening with the football and the part why it bends in the opposite direction to what you're expecting is if you kick the ball. Let's say you kick the ball and you try and curve it to the left. The right side of the ball is travelling faster, is travelling into the air, and the left side of the ball is travelling kind of with the air.
Yeah.
And so the air on the right side of the ball, because it's moving very quickly against the surface, can become turbulent. But the air on the left side of the ball, which the smooth ball this is, stays laminar. Okay, and what that does is it actually does the opposite to what happens on a good football, in that the laminar air pushes it towards the turbulent air because it creates more force. So it pushes it in the opposite direction. If your listeners the best equivalence you've probably got of this is in cricket. where someone will try to smooth one side of the ball on their trousers and keep the other side of the ball kind of roughed up.
Well, they even didn't the Aussies get caught with a bottle top in their pocket to actually rough up the other side of it, or a bit of sandpaper,
Exactly,
wasn't it?
yeah.
A bit of sandpaper.
So what they're trying to do there is they're trying to create laminar air on one side of the ball and turbulent air on the other. And so that will push the ball in one direction. So there's lots of ways of changing the direction of flow of a ball. And what's happening with the plastic ball is actually acting counterintuitively, like the opposite way to what you'd expect, because it doesn't have those seams, because it doesn't rough up the air.
Qualifications?
I worked in sports engineering for about 19 years and have a PhD in the area.
Well, that'll do nicely, Simon. Here you go.
Thank you.
What a run we're on. What a roll we're on now. 28. Should we squeeze in one more before I think we should. Let's go to Wolverhampton. Matthew's there. Question or answer, Matthew?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Forgive me, it's a bit of an obscure question, so I'll ask the question and I might need to explain it a little bit.
Okay.
The question is, who would have been the last English monarch who we would not understand with the language today?
I know this.
So you know how languages change over the years, and I don't mean sort of like a French or German king.
I thought you meant someone who couldn't speak English.
No, not like that. I mean, obviously, because languages have changed so much over the years. So, as a hypothetical, if you was to take all the English monarchs that we have a record of and line them up, and if King Charles was to go down the line and introduce himself and have a conversation with each one, how far back would he go until he reaches the point where he says, "I'm sorry, I can't understand you anymore"?
Well, it would depend partly on him, wouldn't it? Because did you do Chaucer at school?
I beg pardon?
Did you do Chaucer at school, Geoffrey Chaucer? Did you study any Chaucer?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
So that would be 14th century. And I mean, if you study it, you can work it out that it's English.
Yeah.
But so he called, like, you've got stuff in it like a very parfit, gentle knight. And parfit means perfect, and you know what a knight is. But if you that sort of 1360 something, 1370. So you'd find out who was on the throne then. That would probably still be just about understandable. And then when was Beowulf? So it's about really language. So Beowulf is in Old English, and that is probably the point at which. So that would be the early Middle Ages, mid 7th.
I just wondered if maybe there was like
century.
I mean, obviously. Languages, it does change over the years, but you'd think that...
Well, that's pre-monarchs. No, I know. Yeah. I understand exactly what you're saying. And the monarchs just become a useful measuring stick, don't they? Because it's going to be a point in time when the English or the Anglo language being spoken bears so little resemblance to what we talk today that we wouldn't understand anything about what they were saying. It's a Germanic language, so it's also when it was all Saxon. I've got some good callers on this. I've got at least two. There's Martin up in Cumbria, and there's I can't remember his name now, which is terrible of me, really. But someone who speaks Old English, so they're probably going to be able to put a rough handle on when it happened, and then we can just look up who the monarch was at the time, and you'd get a fair answer to your question.
Super.
I'll see what I can do. Thank you, Matthew. 12:31 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 12:34. So I'm going to clarify that question because it's a really good one. It would be George the First, wouldn't it? Be George the First who couldn't speak English at all. But that's not what the question was about. I've written down the chap's name. I can't read my own handwriting. What was the name of the lovely bloke the lad in Wolverhampton who just asked the question about King speaking English? Matthew. Good Lord, I don't know what I wrote. That doesn't count. George I doesn't count. Also, I mean, William the Conqueror probably couldn't speak English when they'd all be speaking Norman, wouldn't they? So it's about an English king who couldn't speak English in a way that we would recognise today. Just to be clear, because I'm getting in lots of answers that are not wrong but are also not right, if you understand what I mean. Ash is in Northampton. That's going to be the ocean question, Ash.
It certainly is, James. Good morning. Good afternoon now.
Hello. What have you got? Well, I thought I'd answered that. The Mariana Trench. I did say there was going to be a steward's inquiry on this, and lo and behold. So what's the deepest part of the ocean, and how do we know?
So it is part of the Mariana Trench. It's called Challenger Deep.
So I was right, but also not right at the same time.
Yeah, it's a very particular part. It's 11,000 metres deep.
Gosh.
And 2 people have been there.
Really?
That's Charles Beebe and Otis Spartan on the bathysphere.
I don't know what you just said.
Two American naval officers went there on a bathysphere back in the 1950s.
Really? A bathysphere is a big ball that goes underwater.
Absolutely.
Thought
and
so.
then the space race kicked off, and nobody cared about it anymore. But so there you go. How do we know it's the deepest?
Yeah.
So you said sonar. That's not quite correct.
I didn't say it. I sort of shouted it quite triumphantly. Do you know, that's because Keith, actually, to be clear, because this is very much a team effort, that's because Keith said it in my ear very, very, very confidently.
So what you do is you would have to use explosive ranging to get that deep.
Wow.
So you set up some hydrophones, which are just microphones underwater, and you would then set off dynamite.
And measure the echo.
Yeah, the pressure wave would then be enough to get all the way down and back up.
Yeah. So it's a bit like sonar.
It's close. So you're using a similar process, just not sound. I suppose it is sound, but you're using a massive... To get down there, you'd need a pressure wave like dynamite.
Otherwise, it would get lost on the way there. Never mind
Absolutely.
the way back.
There is a great book on this. It's a great chapter in a book, the Bill Bryson's Short History of Nearly Everything.
Oh, it's a great book, that.
I used to make my students read the section on the deep ocean because it's all about mapping, how they worked out time, everything. Brilliant book.
A brilliant answer. Reminders of your qualifications?
Chief Officer in the Merchant Navy and lecturer in navigation, stability and cargo.
Great work. And also, you knock me off the board then. You steal my round of applause there. Thank you, Ash. I hope Sonny is happy. That was a brilliant... Oh, hang on. The other bit, which you can't... I mean, is it possible that there is an undiscovered deeper bit? But, I mean, theoretically, it might be.
Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No, because we've pretty much covered all of it with acoustic ranging. Not to the level where it's super in depth, but we pretty much know that's the deepest.
That'll do nicely. You gave him. We had the applause. Yeah, nice one, Ash. Speak to you soon. Claire's in Rugby. Claire, question or answer?
Oh, it's a question, please.
Carry on.
I was just wondering why it is as you get older.
Yes.
You see on older people have. And I'm one of them, I'm just getting them, little spots called liver spots.
Like massive, giant freckles?
Well, they end up giants, but why do they happen?
I know this because I looked it up.
Oh.
You can get them if you're younger, but you are more likely to get them if you're older. And it's the melanin, isn't it? It's the I'm not going to be able to remember. But it's like, I mean...
Not everybody gets them, I don't think.
No. So it's the melanin, the pigment cell.
Yeah.
Goes into overdrive. It just starts working.
Yeah, it just seems to happen on hands.
Well, because they get the most light, the most sunlight. It's UV light that triggers it, and the more exposure you get, the more likely you are to get the spots, age spots, liver spots.
Yeah, okay.
That's it. Because do you know why? Because I bought I got one at the top right-hand corner of my forehead. Claire.
On your forehead?
Yeah, on my forehead. You can see them on forehead sometimes. Foreheads. Tomato. No, you do. You got it. So I looked it up, and I bought some fancy cream.
Yeah.
And it worked. And it went.
Oh, really? What fancy cream was that?
Amazingly, I can't remember. Oh. So I thought I'd bought it from Liberty, because when I'm feeling a little bit flush, I like to frequent Liberty. Yeah. And so I thought it would be on my purchase history, and I could not find it for love or money. So I wonder whether I ordered it online from, just a direct... It was a yellow bottle. And it was about £40. It wasn't cheap, but I thought I was worth it. I'll be honest with you.
L'Oreal, you're worth it.
Exactly that, and it worked. And the reason I mention it, and I'm going to take a round of applause for this because I know it's true. It's like the stuff that creates freckles or makes you go brown just goes a bit like the other question about why we get slower as we get older. It's just not working as well as it used to do, and it ends up giving you a liver spot. It's coming back, so I need to get some more cream.
Oh.
I'm off to Greece on Sunday, so I mean it's plimmin' hot out there at the moment, so I'm going to need to keep an eye on it. So that is what happens. May I ask, did you spend a lot of time on sunbeds over the years?
No, but as a child, because I'm 63 now,
right.
But as a child, we were out in the sunshine all the time without any protection.
Well, that will be a part of it. That will definitely be a part of it.
That is part of it, is it?
Yeah, it is definitely exposure to UV light, ultraviolet light.
Right.
Which is the same thing that gives you a suntan, but this just means that the pigments producing the melanin are a bit skew with.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. Round of applause. I'll take that one then, and that makes up for the one that Ash nicked off me. Thank you, Claire. Stay safe. 12:41. Kerry is on the Shetland Islands. Kerry, question or answer?
Oh, this is a question, James.
Carry on.
I keep chickens. I usually have about 12. They vacillate up and down from a few.
Yes.
When one dies, which can be by natural causes or by age,
or
they
violence.
go into
you never had a fox get in your hen house.
We don't have foxes in Shetland, James, nor badgers.
This has been what an education today's show has been. Around every corner, we've discovered a nugget of new information. Is that right? Do you still have red squirrels? Do you still have red squirrels?
No, we don't have squirrels because we've hardly got any trees. We've got polecats, we've got frogs, and we've got lots of rats and mice, and we've got hedgehogs.
But no tree. No, but you're right because of the wind. The trees don't.
Well, there are trees, but
not enough
that many.
to sustain a squirrel population. Have you never got a rat? Sadly. You've never had a rat in your hen house because they can do quite a lot of damage.
We have had rats, and the local environment have been along to because they come down from the bank, which is council property.
Okay.
We're in a rural position. Anyway, chickens.
Yeah, sorry.
When a chicken
I like the way
dies-
that I'm the presenter and you're getting annoyed with me, distracting you from the matter in hand. It's supposed to be the other way around. It's not. But here we are. Carry on, Kerry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when a chicken dies, one of my chicken dies, it's usually because of old age, or it could be just disease, or it could have prolapse or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, within half an hour, the thing's gone into complete and utter rigor mortis, like a board.
Yeah.
And when I go to the supermarket and buy a chicken, because I don't eat my chickens, I mean, there's no way I could put Henrietta into an oven.
And no, if you don't want to eat your own animals, never give them a name. That's my advice.
No, I know, but we do.
Well, then that's it. So it's never going to be lunch. Can't go from Henrietta to lunch. Go on.
So when I go to the supermarket and buy a chicken, the chicken's absolutely as loose as anything. There's no rigor mortis.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out that my chickens get rigor mortis. Chickens get rigor mortis within half an hour.
Yeah, so do humans.
And well, that's correct, but you don't eat humans. But when you go to the supermarket and buy chicken, it's all.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Rigor mortis isn't permanent. You don't watch a lot of crime drama, do you, Kerry?
Well, it can be permanent.
No, it can't. No, it sets in and then it goes away again.
Oh. Well,
so that's how they estimate time of death. So they might say, rigor mortis hasn't set in yet, which means the death was quite recent, or we've come out the other side of rigor mortis.
Well, I blew that one, didn't I?
No, it's a great question. I'm presuming that chickens and humans share enough physiognomy for the rigor mortis question to be the same. But it's not. You don't go as stiff as a board and stay as stiff as a board.
Oh, yeah, my chicken's like after half an hour, that's it. They're
yeah, but if you came back after a day, it would be soft again. But by that point, you've disposed of it.
Oh, that's supposedly true. Yeah, they do go in the rubbish bag and out with the rubbish, sadly.
See, so next time you've got a dead chicken with rigor mortis, just hang on to it for a while and it'll go all floppy again.
I'll have to. By the way, if you're off to Greece, go to Nissaros, which is just south of Kos, magical. The capital
might be 500 miles away from where I'm staying. What are you talking about?
Well, take a ferry there.
I'm going to take a ferry there. You see, it's 40 degrees.
It's a magical little place. The capital's called Mandraki.
It does sound delicious.
And it's a little place called Nissaros. It's got a volcano that you can actually walk on at the top of the island.
I think it's going to be hot enough, mate, without me going visiting volcanoes. Anyway, I'll take a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I hope I got that right. It's the stiff chickens. I remember. Do you remember the stiff chickens they used to play at the Market Tavern in Kidderminster? No, I thought that worked.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
Today's show, right, has been pretty special. I think we can all agree. And that is a message for all the people who are still testing me at 10:30, telling me how good yesterday's show was. You made me rise to the challenge. I don't know what the highlight was, but we've now got the best Doris watch ever. You think I'm exaggerating? I promise you I'm not. Let me get it absolutely right, though, because I don't want even the vaguest possibility that I misrepresent the best Doris watch ever. Every time you think Doris watch can't get any more ridiculous, up pops Nadine Dorries, making Doris watch even more ridiculous. So just bear with 1 second. Here it is. Stephen Swinford from The Times again. Actually, he's having a very good day. Well worth following on Twitter. He's scoop-tastic. Let's do it. Doris watch. It is now... I forgot to do the 34 days. 34 days since Nadine Dorries pledged to resign as an MP with, and I quote, immediate effect. Comedy pause. Nadine Dorries is still an MP. But not only that, The Times has been told, it's reported this morning, that Dorries sent a WhatsApp message to Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, asking directly if she could be included on Liz Truss's future list of peers after being blocked from receiving a peerage in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. That is possibly the most pathetic thing I've ever heard from a senior politician. But there it is. And of course, we discovered yesterday that she may well have broken the law as well. The Honours Prevention of Abuses Act 1925 could come into play, Simon Case said, that they'd taken initial advice but had asked for more. I would have thought that asking for a peerage was probably pretty close to breaching the Prevention of Abuses, the Honours Prevention of Abuses Act 1925, especially if you've got, I don't know, a column in the Daily Mail and a TV show on one of Rupert Murdoch's platforms, because you could, make life quite difficult. Make life quite difficult for you. I don't know, but there it is. That is, as I told you, it's the best one yet. Doris. Watch. Back to Mystery Hour. Lewis is in Putney. What's it going to be, Lewis?
Slowing down with age, James.
Tell me about it, mate. Oh, you mean the question. Carry on.
You got it right. It's wear and tear. But to take it down, and like the previous athlete, I wouldn't want to disparage his comment.
Martin went to the Olympics, you know.
He did. To take it down to a basic biological sense, it's because of accumulated DNA damage that your body accumulates over time. So, like back in the day when monks would copy the Bible from another monk, or from another book, and then he'd make a little mistake, and then the next monk along would do the same, and he'd copy the mistake. And basically that's happening in every cell in your body all the time when they divide, and then gradually over time, lots of little changes like that slow down different cells. So it reduces like hormonal activity, and it happens in every cell in your body. And like you were saying with the skin and the liver spots, the UV light causes DNA damage, which is why we should wear sunscreen.
Oh, there it is. So the DNA damage is what turns the cells, the pigment cells, into rogue pigment cells, producing liver spots.
It's also your body compensating for the damage there, so it's trying to prevent further damage.
Love it. Qualifications?
I have a degree in medical genetics, and my dissertation was in premature aging, progeria syndrome.
Oh, I don't think that's popped up before, has it?
No, but this is the first time you talked about aging. So
I know.
But use it.
I'm aware of some of your other qualifications, but I don't think we'd ever got onto the territory of what your actual thesis was about. I love it. Round of applause for Lewis. Very clever man, Lewis, if you haven't heard him on the programme before. He's one to watch. 12:52 is the time. Richard is in Brighton. Richard, question or answer?
Answer. Oh, my goodness. This is... It's like Lewis and I were conversing together in the pub beforehand.
This is so fantastic. Yeah. So you're now going to run with what Lewis has shared with us.
Yes. So underlying it all is as Lewis said, is the genetic mistakes that build up over time.
Yeah.
And that results in a cumulative loss of what we call motor units, which are the link between nerves and the muscles. As we get older, we have a gradual loss in motor units, so our muscles become weaker and less powerful.
Yes.
And similarly, in terms of the supply of substrate, in terms of energy and oxygen to those muscles, as our cardiovascular system weakens over time, we get a gradual reduction in delivery of substrate to those motor units, which are less in number, and so we become less powerful, less explosive, less strong over time. But it's multifactorial in terms of loss of collagen, loss of elasticity in our tendons and muscles, and loss of higher centers in terms of how we control those muscles and how we react to things like the starting pistol. So all of that, which accumulates and comes together, results in a gradual loss of performance over time.
Absolutely beautiful. And that is, I mean, between the two of you, you've knocked it out of the park, haven't you? I've got it completely. And plus Martin giving us the specifics on the athlete as well. So that is one of the most comprehensive Mystery Hour answers ever received. Oh, hang on. What are your qualifications? You might be making it up.
I did an undergraduate degree in human biology. I'm also an anaesthetic consultant.
Round of applause for Richard. Happy days. I can't believe more people. Actually, I've got too many messages coming in from my inbox, but I can't believe no one did. What time is it? 12:53. I might, because I know you don't take questions by text. So this is from Kelvin, who's a trucker. He goes, "Hi James, question please. If I lost or can't remember the password to my iPhone, what can I do about it?" Tony's in Winchmore Hill. Tony, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Tony.
It's your surnames one.
Oh, yes.
Around about the 15th, 16th century, people started leaving the land. And once they left the lands that they were, attenuated
Tilling, the lands that they had tilled.
Sorry, say again?
Tilled. They were tilling the lands.
They tilled the land.
Yes.
They sowed and they reaped.
They did.
But with the 1398, with the Black Plague, with the Black Death, of course, that means that the working population is half. People tend to leave the land, move to the city, plus the growth of mercantilism and shops. People lose that identification with their surname as a profession.
So
how's that?
I think we're nearly there. So, well, no. So when. Mercantilism would make it happen more that you'd be known as Tony the Cooper or Tony the Miller, wouldn't you? Or you're talking about... that's village life. That's village life. So you would be... And then when you were living in the town, it became your name rather than your job description. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, yeah. And of course, apprenticeships as well.
Yeah, I like it. So you're putting it as
your master.
Early 15th century then, are we, roughly around there?
I reckon about that time. Well, 1398 is the plague.
That's the plague, and so then the move towards the town, and people in the countryside would still be known as the Smith and the Cooper, and but it then sort of cross-fertilised back out from the town to the countryside.
Yeah,
I think you're probably right.
I think I probably am.
But what I mean,
I'm not a proud man.
What did they write in the Doomsday Book? Did they not have family names then?
Well, they would have been included, wouldn't they?
But that's a long time before the Black Death.
I don't think in the Doomsday Book they included peasants who were.
It was only landowners. It was only landowners.
Yeah.
By definition, because he wanted to know how much land he'd conquered.
Jones. If you own the land, then you own the people on it.
Yeah, there you go. All right, cool. So then you would have had, and posh people had names based on all sorts of things, really, didn't they? Coats of arms.
It's the old Noel Coward joke, isn't it? Where a guy goes up to Noel Coward and says, "My family have been here since he came over with the Conqueror." Noel Coward went, "And how are they finding it?"
Qualifications, Tony?
I'm a professor of English.
Beautifully done. Round of applause for Professor Tony, please.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And I look forward to the next time. We haven't done the King's one, the point at which Tony might have been able to help with that one as well. Michael's in Leighton. Michael, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question, thank you.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You had one similar before with regards to pubs and the names Earl and the Duke and so forth.
Yes.
Which I think you quite well answered. But me and my friend were debating something else with regards to the pubs and the signs.
Go on.
Which would be why they would use like foxes or a dog or...
It's the same reason. What was my answer to the last one?
cannot remember.
Because I know this one.
Names.
I know this one.
Yeah.
I know this one. This is because, Michael.
Yeah.
Back in the day, literacy levels were very low. So what a pub sign would do is it would be a pictogram. So if you and I were going to meet in the Black Bull and neither of us could read, how would we know? Right. How would we know that we had happened upon the Black Bull?
Unless you saw a picture. Gotcha.
There it is. And I tell you when it gets interesting, and this is my own theory. I haven't actually examined or researched this. But when you come across some quite odd pub names, like, for example, you might come across the Bell and Crown. It's not an odd pub name, but I think that's because there are probably two bells nearby. So one of the landlords decided he would better stick a crown on his sign to distinguish himself from the Bell. It became the Bell and Crown. Why are you looking at me like that, Sheila Fogarty?
It's fascinating.
Oh, good. I thought you were looking sceptical.
No, I'm a satisfied listener.
I'm very glad to hear. There's a lot of it about. There's a lot of it about. Are you happy with that answer, Michael?
1.4 million and one.
And that, exactly.
I am more than happy. I'm probably going to go look for a Bell and Crown now to have a
There's a nice one in Chiswick, actually. Lovely on the river at this time of year. It's a Fuller's pub, so you know you'll be all right. Round of applause for me. Thank you. That's it from today. The winner is Martin Gillingham, everybody's favourite former Olympic hurdler turned rugby commentator and broadcaster. That was funny. That was really funny. Anyway, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player. You can rewind live radio or enjoy the whole show podcast. If you rewind to 11:05 and 34 seconds, you will hear me predict the next stage in Boris Johnson's desperate attempts to avoid responsibility for anything, which then actually happened at 11:41. Even by my own standards, that's a new world record. All LBC shows are there. Biggest podcast, the Mystery Hour podcast archive, so you can listen to hundreds of them. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrook with you at 4. Sheila Fogarty with you now.
What I was actually thinking when you caught sight of my face was I know a pub called the Odd Fellow. So what would the pictogram for that be?
I don't know.
Or who would the pictogram for that be?
I don't know.
Think of a dead person, just say that.
Might be. Yeah. Might have a coffin. I don't know.
The odd fella. Not the dead fella, the odd
fella.
fella.
No, the odd fellow. I don't know. I mean, that's obviously a post-pictogram period
Maybe
pub.
it is.
A post-pictogram period pub.
Oh, God. Yeah, you definitely need to go home now. Thank you, James. 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 Thank you.